This is a compilation of Valve and id Software lore I have created over the past few years. No intros, no outros, just lore. Enjoy. In the lore and story behind the Doomslayer. Way before the Doomslayer became one of the most powerful forces in the universe, he was a simple space marine from planet Earth. While most of the early years of this hero are shrouded in mystery, it is believed that he came from a long line of war heroes, those of which included B.J. Blazkowicz and Commander Keen. As one of Earth's most trained soldiers, the Marine followed his orders well. That was, until he was ordered to fire upon innocent civilians by his commanding officer. In this moment, he assaulted his commanding officer instead. This action, in his mind, was the right thing to do, but as punishment, he was dishonorably discharged from service and transferred to Mars to work with the Union Aerospace Corporation. Here, their facility was home to radioactive waste facilities on Mars and its two moons of Phobos and Deimos. For 3 years, the Marine worked security at this secret base and heard rumors of teleportation experiments that the UAC had been conducting. But on one day, he received a message from within the Phobos base that they required immediate military support, that something evil was coming out of the gateways. And shortly after, the Marine and the other troops traveled to the base to help them. Upon arrival, the Marine was ordered to secure the perimeter as the rest of the team went into the base. For hours, he waited for them to contact him, but all he picked up on the radio was guns firing, screams, bones cracking, and then silence. Believing his squad to be dead, the Marine entered the facility with only a pistol in hand, and he came across the demonic entities that had used these gateways to travel from Hell to Phobos. As a skilled Marine, he managed to defend himself against the waves of these evil creatures that had taken over this facility and mutilated his squad, and over time, traveled through a portal into Hell itself. Inside, he came upon the Spider Mastermind who was behind this whole invasion, and using the weapons of the dead he had come across over his journey through the facility and Hell, he fought with and killed this creature. After this victory, the Marine discovered a hidden doorway, and upon entering it, he found himself on Earth. Then he realized that while he had been fighting on Phobos, the Spider Mastermind had also invaded his home planet. As he traveled across the planet, he saw the chaos that this invasion had created. Whole cities were in ruins and the dead littered the streets. When he finally arrived at his family home, he discovered the bodies of his wife, child, and his pet rabbit, Daisy. Everything had been taken from him, and he needed his vengeance. So, he took an old family photo and a piece of Daisy with him to fuel his rage against the demons that had destroyed his life. He discovered that the leaders of Earth were attempting to evacuate the survivors of this invasion, but they needed access to a spaceport to do so. The problem was that the invaders had set up a force field around it, so the Marine, now also going by the name Doom Guy, slayed the demons in all his rage, and the remaining population of humanity managed to escape the planet. As the last known human on Earth and without a family, the Doom Guy felt like he had done his part and waited for death. But then, he received a message from Earth Control in space, where they told him that the invasion had actually originated in the heart of his home city. So, he traveled there and discovered another door to Hell. He believed that if he re-entered, then he could close it from the other side and save the planet. Upon his arrival in Hell, he destroyed every demonic entity that came across him. Where the demons came to fear him, the Doom Guy was a force to be reckoned with. Eventually, he discovered the Icon of Sin, a gruesome giant demon. Using all of the skills he had trained over this awful ordeal,
the Doomguy destroyed the beast, and, as a result, left devastation in Hell and closed the portal to Earth, where he and humanity returned to rebuild their planet. As time went on, the Doomguy struggled to adapt to a normal life. His dreams were plagued by the horrific events he had survived, the demons, blood, guts, and the loss of his family. But the doctors could not help him get past this, and even worse, his battle was not over. On Mars, something had survived his wrath. Going by the name the Mother of All Demons, she wandered Phobos and resurrected the dead, even more powerful than they were before, and after the UAC discovered another potential invasion was on the way, they sent the Doomguy to take her down. On yet another harrowing journey, the Doomguy, fueled by rage, destroyed the demons on his way to Hell and slayed the Mother, yet another powerful beast. But this time, he decided to close the gateway from inside Hell so that he could stop any upcoming invasion from within, a sacrifice for humanity. For some time, the Doomslayer sparked fear in Hell and the bodies of demons piled up around him. That was until the Resurrector, the sister of the Mother of Demons, decided to do something about it. She wanted revenge for her sister's death, and so teleported him back to Earth into a facility overrun by demons. Following his namesake, he brought doom to every demon he encountered on his way back to Hell, where he came upon the Resurrector, and upon this encounter, the Doomguy had no problem destroying her, just like her sister. And as he once again chose to remain in Hell, he had a vision of a path of perpetual torment, a path through doom. And as the years passed, his mind only focused on one thing: the blood of his enemies. Suddenly, the Doomguy found himself in a new place. This was not somewhere he recognized. Unknown to him, he had somehow traveled through space and time onto a new world. Some even say to a different timeline, the world of Argent D'Nur. In this age, the Argenta people lived under the rule of King Novik, and this was a peaceful period for them. They all worshipped the Maker species, who, upon first discovery of them, gave the Argenta new technologies and information to thrive in the universe. In return for this knowledge, the Argenta went out into the universe to spread the word and teachings of the Maker to every sentient species they discovered. As scouts explored the land outside of the city of Sentinel Prime, they came upon this man that had suffered so much. They brought him into their city, where they introduced him to the Argenta priests. This Outlander was a species they had not encountered before, where they gathered all of the information they could about him from his broken, bloodied body, as they could not understand the English language, his ramblings of demons, guts, and blood. By Argenta law, any stranger that came upon them was to be judged inside of the Colosseum by trial of combat. If he died, he died, but if he won, he would be allowed to live to fight in the Maker's army. From the stands, the Argenta watched as the Outlander overcame his physical injuries and fought against the creatures of the Colosseum. They saw how he fought in a brutal, chaotic manner as his war cry echoed across the arena. Here, he even gained supporters where they chanted the words "rip and tear" just as he did, even though they did not understand his foreign tongue. With his flawless technique and rage to fuel him, the Outlander survived his trial by combat, where even the best warriors in King Novik's army admired his battle prowess from afar. As the Outlander was returned to his living quarters, the Argenta documented his mad ramblings of evil, demons, death, and a world that thrived on it, Hell. So, the Khan Maker, the leader of the Maker species, asked her minions to learn this foreign tongue so that she could understand what he was saying. As one of the first species created to understand and develop technologies, the Khanmaker quickly learned English and spoke to the Outlander. As she listened, she took note of these creatures born of fire in another land that they had not yet discovered. She believed that it could be yet another place for the Argenta to spread word and gift with Maker technology, when in reality, this place only wanted one thing: death. As time passed, the Outlander stopped speaking completely and focused solely on fighting for the Argenta army with the other prisoners that had survived the Colosseum, but these battles were nothing compared to what was coming. On the eve of the Black Star, the demons broke through reality and created portals of fire from Hell to Argent D'Nur. It is unknown whether they came upon this place by chance or whether they followed the Doom Guy, but a new war began. In their hordes, the demonic entities took down major settlements on Argent D'Nur, where many died attempting to fight them off. So, the Night Sentinels were sent in to attempt to contain this problem, where the Holy Wars began. The army of the angelic makers against the demons of hell. It was quickly discovered that these were not normal beings and that their weapons came from the very essence of a tortured soul. It was here that it became clear that these demons had invaded Argent D'Nur in order to kill as many mortals as they could to acquire hell essence from their deaths. And as more of the Argenta people fell to these evil beings, the stronger Hell's forces became. As the Doomguy fought alongside the other armies of Argent D'Nur, in the background, the best and brightest worked to understand how the demons created energy from the souls of the dead, and it was one of the priests that uncovered the secret of Hell Essence. Upon the discovery that a soul had to be tortured and harnessed with technology, they believed that if they could somehow travel into Hell, they could cut off their source of power from within and could end this war. But as they learned more about this power, it corrupted the priests and the Khanmaker, who believed that they should actually use this energy to improve their armies and the Maker and Argenta way of life. So, instead of stopping this power, they leaned into it and created their own secret factories in Hell to combine Hell Essence with the energy of the Argenta people, Wraith Essence, where they developed Argent Energy. Throughout this time, blood filled the battlefields as the demons attempted to claim more land and life from Argent D'Nur. Here, the Inquisitors of the Sentinel Guard took note of how long the Outlander had survived against this never-ending force as other warriors fell around him. He ripped and tore them apart, and the death of one demon just spurred him on to kill more. He was a being that thrived on the death of this invading demonic force, and with this, King Novik deemed him worthy to be elevated to the King's army, the Night Sentinels. This was new for the Night Sentinels, as only the Argenta people had ever been inducted into this army. But the Doomguy showed great promise and technique. To some of the soldiers here, they believed his addition broke tradition, but others saw his ability to fight in any situation, in any condition, and still come out alive, stained in the blood of his enemies. So, he was trained as a Night Sentinel, where he learned their codes and techniques. Over time, the Night Sentinels fought many battles and took down so many demons, but more always came. So, the Doomguy asked to enter Hell itself to fight the demonic invasion from within, where he led the charge and even impressed those hesitant to his involvement in the Night Sentinels. Over the span of 3 journeys into Hell, the Doomguy fought against exhaustion, wounds, and sickness in his never-ending lust for demonic blood, and he even grew stronger thanks to his brothers in the army. And as such, over the years of this awful war against Hell, the Night Sentinels accepted him as one of their own, one of their greatest warriors. Unknown to the population of Argent D'Nur, the Maker had perfected Argent Energy and manufactured it into weaponry to fight against the demonic horde. But the Night Sentinels felt something was off with this discovery and distanced themselves from it, as whispers began of an agreement between the Maker and the Lords of Hell, something that could not be confirmed just yet. In this never-ending war, the Black Star ascended to its zenith and the war came to its climax. As King Novik sat on his throne, he was made aware of another wave of the demonic army on their way to Taris Nabad, the capital city of Argent D'Nur, and this army was led by a monstrous titan, the Dreadnought. In its wake, the armies of Argent D'Nur felled this giant creature, and it appeared to be impossible to take it down. Although the Doomguy joined them in this brutal fight, even he was unable to injure it as this relentless assault continued. Watching from the castle, Sama Maker, a seraphim, an elevated member of the Maker species, sought out the Outlander and brought him to the Chapel of Purity. Inside of this chapel, the Khan Maker had developed the Divinity Machine. In secret, he placed the Outlander inside and activated it. This machine had been imbued with the power of the Dark Lord himself, and as the power flowed from the machine into the Doomguy, he absorbed it and became something new. As the Outlander left the device, he discovered that he now had the abilities of super strength, durability, speed and stamina, to name just a few, and to match his newfound ability, a person known only as the Wretch enhanced his Praetor suit so that he could thrive even better in a combat situation. Even more useful, his newfound godlike powers allowed him to absorb the souls of those he slayed, and as such, he grew more powerful with each kill. With his newfound abilities, the Doomguy rejoined the fight with the Crucible in hand. As described by observers to this event, the Doomguy fought against this demonic horde and reached the Dreadnought, where this true, sentinel warrior king plunged the blade of the Crucible into its chest. And from here, he was no longer the Doomguy or Outlander, he was the Doomslayer. In this victory, with the Doomslayer on their side, the Night Sentinels once again took the fight to hell. With his enhanced abilities, they were able to travel deeper into this realm, also with the help of the weapons made by Argent Energy. Then, they discovered just what Argent Energy came from upon finding factories in the region of Necrovol that the Khan Maker had created with Maker technology. Even worse, they uncovered that the very energy they had been using had been created from the torture of their fallen brothers on the battlefield. Upon discovery of the betrayal of the Khan Maker and her deal with the Lords of Hell, the Doomslayer and the Night Sentinels returned to Argent D'Nur. Although the Doomslayer did not care about the politics of Argent D'Nur, he did care about any who allied themselves with Hell, and this betrayal meant that the Khan Maker was just another creature to destroy. When the Night Sentinels told the Argenta people of what they had discovered in Hell, a civil war broke out between those loyal to and fearful of the Makers against the Night Sentinels who had fought against the demons of Hell. As the civil war raged on for years, the Argenta priests publicly allied themselves with the Night Sentinels and suggested to them that if they could enter Necrovol and shut down the factories, then the Maker and demonic forces would lose their source of energy, and thus the never-ending war would cease. So, following the Argenta priests, the Night Sentinels entered the Hell Portal with the aim to travel to Necrovol. But upon entering, the Night Sentinels found themselves scattered across Hell, all separated from one another as the gates closed behind them. It was here that the Night Sentinels discovered that they had been betrayed by the priests, and this was a trap. As each of these soldiers fought alone, they fell one by one as the never-ending wave of demons claimed them until only the Doomslayer and Commander Valen stood, each in completely different parts of Hell. Valen survived and decided to spend his remaining days in Hell in a self-imposed exile for making a deal with the Dark Lord in return for the resurrection of his son, while the Doomslayer began a killing spree on every wave of demon he encountered. He had originally been able to take down these creatures with ease, but now, with his enhanced abilities, his blood-fueled rage and excitement only increased. On his endless killing streak, he crushed the obsidian pillars of blood temples, took down the beasts of the Nine Circles, and used their suffering to fuel his rage for his goal to take down the whole of Hell. It is said that the Doomslayer, trapped in Hell, fought for aeons against demons, as time worked differently in this realm, and he became a part of Hell's landscape. The demons knew of him, they feared him, and knew that he would eventually come for them. There were always more demons to fight. As new structures were formed in Hell, the inhabitants of this twisted land etched his name into the foundation. With each kill, his strength grew, undying, always thirsty for the death of more demons. At one point, the demons even selected a Titan as a champion of Hell and sent it to find the Doomslayer to kill him, but he was too powerful and took it down. So they had to find another way to stop the murderous reign of this superpowered human. Desperate, the demon priests of the Blood Temples came together to stop the crusade of the Doomslayer, where they laid a trap inside of a Blood Temple. To do this, they lured him inside with prey into the tombs of the Bloodkeep in Kadinga Sanctum, and as he entered, the priests collapsed the temple and placed him inside of a sarcophagus cursed by the demon priests themselves. In here, he was trapped, stuck in stasis. This moment created relief for the population of Hell, where they could continue their activities without the threat of the Doomslayer, and as a warning to any who would accidentally open this sarcophagus, they etched the mark of the Doomslayer on its surface. In 2095, the Union Aerospace Corporation discovered the Argent Fracture on a geological expedition to Mars. Upon observation and analysis of this, they established an outpost and extracted Argent plasma from this fracture to solve an energy crisis that planet Earth was going through. Over time, they explored the fracture and learned of the hellish realm within, where they took armed guards with them to fight off demons as they wandered the twisted lands. On one of these expeditions of Hell, the UAC came upon the Praetor suit and a sarcophagus within Kadinga Sanctum, which they extracted and brought through the fracture to their facility on Mars. In their exploration of this land, the personnel of the UAC came upon tablets and writings of a slayer that had made his mark on the land. The leader of this expedition, Samuel Hayden, was actually the Seraphim who had given the Doomslayer his powers way back when Argent D'Nur fought against the demonic invasion. But following his actions during that time, he had lost his reputation and transferred his mind into a human body to hide away on Earth. Hayden appeared to want to help Earth's energy crisis and did his best to lead the UAC in their endeavors. But he suspected his protege, Olivia Pierce, of having ulterior motives. He knew of the manipulative nature of the demons of Hell, and it seemed that Olivia was falling for them. So, he took the sarcophagus of the Doomslayer and hid it away from her so that he could wake him up if he was ever needed again. Later, in 2149, the Doomslayer awoke. To his confusion, he looked at the sarcophagus he had been trapped in, and it appeared he was not in Hell anymore. This was a human structure, but one thing had not changed. He was surrounded by demons. As the Doomslayer explored his surroundings, he put on his Praetor suit and discovered that he was on Mars in the UAC facility, and that a UAC researcher, Olivia Pierce, had made a pact with a Dark Lord of Hell. In doing so, she had unleashed a demonic invasion. On his journey to understand what had actually happened here, he was introduced to Samuel Hayden, who kept his real identity a secret. And from here, Hayden guided the Doomslayer through the facility and updated him on the situation with the help of an artificial construct called Vega. Following Hayden's orders, the Doomslayer did what he did best, ripped and tore apart the demonic entities he came across. While it is unknown what the Doomslayer's intentions were, he complied with Hayden's orders and stopped Olivia Pierce from opening a hell portal, and after traveling across Mars and Hell, he was asked by Hayden to locate the well, the source of power for this demonic invasion, to which the Doomslayer secured a Helix Stone, and from it, the location of the well. If he could destroy this, then the invasion would be over. Eventually, the Doomslayer made it to the well and discovered the trapped wraiths that powered it. These creatures had once been worshipped by the Argenta, but when the Maker species had come along, they were later enslaved in secret and their power used to create Argent energy. Using a crucible he had acquired on his path, he absorbed the energy from their bodies where the well shut down, and he prepared to meet Olivia Pierce. In his preparation, he was greeted by the spirits of the Sentinels that had died in this place, his brothers that he had fought alongside a long time ago. When the Doomslayer finally came face to face with Olivia Pierce, he watched as she was betrayed by the Dark Lords and transformed into a spider mastermind, in which the Doomslayer had no trouble in taking down. With the facility now mostly free from demonic activity and the well shut down, Hayden pulled the Doomslayer back to Mars. During this whole situation, Hayden had merely used this force of rage for his own use. He needed the Doomslayer for his combat ability to stop Olivia and to absorb the power from the trapped wraiths into the Crucible. So, when the Doomslayer arrived back on Mars, he kept him restrained as he took the Crucible from him. Samuel Hayden wanted humanity to survive, so he needed this energy to continue the production of Argent energy to fix their energy problem. He knew that the Doomslayer would be against the use of any form of hellish energy, and so, with his use of him depleted, he sent the Doomslayer away to a place where he could not interfere with his plans, but also where he would be safe from any that sought to harm him, stored in an unknown location in a state of stasis until his services were required again. From his prison, the Doomslayer was freed once again, but this time, the Martian UAC facility had not been invaded. It was planet Earth, a familiar situation to what he had encountered before. So, he got to work on finding out who was behind this invasion. He did not know how much time had passed, but at this point, it did not matter. On his journey, working with the AI system Vega, he discovered that the masterminds behind this were the Argenta priests that had tricked him and the Night Sentinels many years before. The Doomslayer always remembered, and the demons, Argenta priests now going by the name of Hell Priests, and the Khan Maker was still on his list for revenge. During his adventure, he managed to acquire the control of the Fortress of Doom, a ship of Maker and Sentinel design that had the ability to teleport him almost anywhere in the universe. Following his actions on Mars, the resistance of humanity saw the Doomslayer as the savior that would help them, while others believed him only to be a myth. Regardless, the Doomslayer managed to rescue Samuel Hayden and track down both Nilox and Ranag, where he killed them both, to the anger of the Khan Maker. Finally, the Doomslayer travelled to the holy city of Sentinel Prime on Argent D'Nur after many years of being away. Here, he tracked down Grav, but this death came at a cost. Although the Hell Priests had caused so much destruction to Argent D'Nur's way of life, The death of a priest on holy ground instantly led to the Doomslayer's excommunication from the Night Sentinels. With her Hell Priests dead, the Khanmaker decided to complete the task herself, and to do this, she began a ritual to unleash the Icon of Sin onto Earth in a last-ditch effort to destroy it. As this giant demonic titan had once been one of the Argenta people, the son of Commander Valen, its heart still remained that of a mortal being. With this, she could control his heart to do her bidding. After the Slayer arrived back in the Fortress of Doom, Samuel Hayden explained that he had won part of this battle, but the Khanmaker was making her next move. With a new titan, the Doomslayer needed a crucible to fight it, so he returned to Argent Daenerys' capital city of Taras Nabad. This city, just like Sentinel Prime, was abandoned after a long war, and after fighting past the remaining demons here, he arrived at the body of the titan he had slain. Although many believed the Dreadnought to have died during the siege of Taras Nabad, it was actually trapped in a state of stasis, where the blade of the crucible kept it in this state. So, upon climbing the beast, the Doomslayer took only the hilt of the crucible and left the blade inside of it. Following this, he wandered Taras Nabad to recharge his crucible for the fight to come. With his weapon ready to go, the Doomslayer followed Hayden's instructions and arrived in the angelic realm of Urdak, where the Maker species came from. To his luck, he managed to interrupt the Khanmaker's ritual to awaken the Icon of Sin, where he stabbed its heart with Commander Valen's blade. This action destroyed the only loyalty it had to the Khanmaker, which left it only to crave destruction with no master to control it. And so, it turned around and travelled through a portal to Earth that the Khanmaker had already set up. Furious with the Doomslayer's consistent meddling in her affairs, the Khanmaker fled, but the Slayer caught up to her and had his revenge. With this creature dead that had created so many issues in his long life, the Doomslayer had yet another fight, the Icon of Sin. After jumping through a portal to Earth, he once again fought against the odds and took down this huge creature in an intense battle where he plunged his blade into the head of the Icon of Sin. With the Hell Priests, the Khanmaker, and the Icon of Sin dead, the invasion of planet Earth was stopped, and the Doomslayer was heralded as a hero to the human race. The war of good and evil had raged on for a long time, but following the Slayer's victory against the Icon of Sin, humanity began to rebuild, but there were still demons to slay. In an attempt to avoid another invasion attempt on Earth, following Samuel Hayden's instructions, the Doomslayer tracked down the body of the Seraphim, who he believed would be a great ally in any war to come. Unknown to him, the body of the Seraphim was actually Samuel Hayden's original form, where he went by the name of Sama Maker. After successfully retrieving this alien body from the secret UAC Atlantica facility, Hayden requested for his mind to be uploaded to the body, where the Doomslayer realized that this was the very same person that had secretly taken him away during the fight with the Dreadnought and subjected him to the Divinity Machine. Now with a great ally on his side, the Seraphim asked him to enter the blood swamps in Hell to retrieve the life sphere of the Father, who, in other cultures, went by the name of God. The Seraphim believed that if they could restore the Father's physical form, then he could be an even greater ally in their fight against Hell's forces. As usual, the Doomslayer followed the Seraphim's orders, where he completed the Trials of Malagog and gained access to the Temple of Souls. Here, he not only discovered the Father's life sphere, but also the sphere of the Dark Lord. In his rage, he decided to destroy the life sphere of the Father and took the Dark Lord's life sphere instead. If he could restore this being into a physical form, then he could potentially kill the devil himself. By Hell's law, if the Dark Lord were defeated in ritual combat, then all demonic life outside of Hell would die with him. This was the ultimate goal of the Doomslayer, and so he proceeded to Urdak, where the Maker's technology would allow him to restore the physical body of the Dark Lord. In the Luminarium, a holy place of the Makers, the Doomslayer entered with the Dark Lord's life sphere in hand. But the Seraphim ambushed him, enraged that the Doomslayer had destroyed his Maker and now back in his original form. They fought. Unsurprisingly, the Doomslayer won and proceeded into the next chamber. After handing the Dark Lord's life sphere to the Makers in this chamber, they restored the Dark Lord in all of his glory. But, strangely enough, his physical form mirrored that of the Doomslayer, the form of the greatest warrior. As soon as the Dark Lord came into full fruition, the Doomslayer shot at him, hoping to finish the fight before it even began. But this was a holy place, and no blood could be spilled here. So, the Dark Lord instead told him that he would wait within Hell in the capital city of Amora, where they could fight. In this last stretch, the Doomslayer travelled across worlds to find a way to Amora, where, when he arrived, many of the other worlds accompanied him on his assault of Hell, each defending their own species that had been subjected to the relentless waves of demons. But the Doomslayer had only one target in mind. In his rage, he fought past Amora's defences and finally arrived in the chamber of the Dark Lord, where they began their fight. In this battle, the Dark Lord explained that he was the original creator and his power had been stolen from him by the Father, and this had, in turn, twisted him and his people into the evil that everyone knew. But the Doomslayer did not care for his story or excuses. The Dark Lord was ultimately responsible for all of the negativity in his life, the death of his family, his rabbit, and everyone he had known. And having absorbed the power of the Dark Lord from the Divinity Machine, the Doomslayer easily matched him in this fight, until the Dark Lord fell down, unable to keep up with the Doomslayer's rage. In his final moments, the Dark Lord asked the Doomslayer if he wanted to say anything to his creator, and in response, the Doomslayer responded only with no, as he plunged his blade into the Dark Lord's chest. Here we explore in the lore and story behind the right man in the wrong place, Dr. Gordon Freeman. Way back before the Earth fell prey to the Combine Empire, a young man grew up in Seattle, Washington. As he studied, he discovered an interest in the world around him and how it worked. Over the years, he took inspiration from the likes of Stephen Hawking and Albert Einstein. These men had given so much to the scientific community, and with this need to understand the universe around him, he followed in their footsteps and began the work to acquire a career in theoretical physics. Through his hard work and determination, Gordon managed to get into a program at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. While there, Gordon made a strong impression on his peers and professors. One of his professors was Dr. Isaac Kleiner. This man was a well-known name in the scientific community after his research and documentation on teleportation, and this bond between them would later grow into a much stronger relationship. While Gordon's time at MIT is mostly undocumented, it should be noted that his thesis was titled Observation of Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen Entanglement on Supraquantum Structures by Induction through Nonlinear Transuranic Crystals of Extremely Long Wavelength Pulse from Mode-Locked Source Array. Although this title is a mouthful, in essence, Gordon's work studied how matter moved through objects without coming into physical contact with them, teleportation. After continued persistence, Gordon graduated from MIT, and without any known dependents, he moved to Austria and became a part of the Institute for Experimental Physics in Innsbruck. Here, they worked on similar research he had dedicated his studies to, the study of teleportation, and over time, he helped them with their research and even observed a series of teleportation experiments. But with this institute rooted in academia instead of actual scientific advancement, Gordon became discouraged by the lack of development and hands-on experience, and so he looked for a new place that would progress his career in theoretical physics. As he believed he needed hands-on experience to develop his understanding, Gordon applied to well-renowned science companies, and one of these was the Black Mesa Corporation, a government-owned research facility that worked on cutting-edge scientific advancements on a daily basis. As a company of this magnitude, only the best and brightest of applicants were given the opportunity to work here, and in the window of time that Gordon had applied, another hopeful scientist had also piqued the interest of the administration team, Dr. Judith Mossman. Although both of these applicants would have been a welcome addition to the facility, Gordon had an advantage. While Gordon had moved from MIT to study in Austria, his professor, Dr. Isaac Kleiner, had also left MIT and secured himself a job at Black Mesa, where he now worked as one of the core members of the anomalous materials team. With an already established positive relationship with Gordon and his additional experience at the Institute for Experimental Physics, Gordon was offered the position at the top secret Black Mesa research facility, and he accepted. The Black Mesa Research Facility conducted top-secret research and experiments, and as such, the employees here were told that they had to live on the grounds for security purposes. So, when Dr. Gordon Freeman arrived, he was given accommodation in room 309 of the Level 3 dormitories in the north wing of the complex. As a Level 3 employee, Gordon was also given access to all of the Level 3 regions of Black Mesa. In this new role, Gordon was assigned to the Anomalous Materials team in Sector C, where this department spent their days experimenting with quantum research as well as nuclear and subatomic work. Their most prominent work featured an anti-mass spectrometer that was used to analyze exotic samples secured by another team. Unknown to many, this team had actually been tasked with entering a place outside of Earth, the border world of Zen, and on their exploration of this hostile land, they brought back crystals for the Anomalous Materials team. It is unknown just how trusted Gordon was in his team to participate in this work, but it is known that one of his roles was as a materials handler of these exotic samples. A small but important role in this department. As time passed, Gordon grew as a valued member of the Anomalous Materials team, where he met the people that would change his life. He already knew Dr. Isaac Kleiner from his days as a student, and their relationship continued to blossom. He also met Dr. Eli Vance, another incredibly smart man that had just had a little girl, Alex. In his exploration of Black Mesa, Gordon also met and became friends with a security guard, Barney Calhoun. Over time, these relationships grew where they essentially became a family. Working at Black Mesa was what Gordon had hoped it would be. He learned and experienced new things every day, and in his downtime, he spent time with his friends. On some occasions, Dr. Kleiner would lock himself out of his lab, and so Gordon and Barney would race through the ventilation ducts of the facility to see who could unlock the door first. While Dr. Kleiner was known for his forgetfulness, Gordon also had a reputation for arriving late, and as time went on, it just became a joke within their department. His work was great, he even won Employee of the Month at one point, but his timekeeping was not. Gordon had settled in well and grown in this team, but change was on the way. On an unspecified date in the early 2000s, some believe this to have been May 16th, the anomalous materials team were given a crystal sample, GG-3883, to analyze with the anti-mass spectrometer, but this one was different. They were told that the administrator of Black Mesa, Dr. Wallace Breen, had gone to great lengths to acquire it, and he told the anomalous materials team that they needed to achieve a conclusive analysis of the sample, even if it meant going outside of the standard testing parameters to achieve it. This order immediately put immense stress and pressure on the anomalous materials team, where Eli, Isaac, Arnie, and the many others got to work. They had been used to working a certain way for so long, and there was always a risk that came with going outside of the standard protocols, but Dr. Breen had ordered them to do this, so they proceeded. There was also a shady government-looking man wandering the facility, putting those he encountered on edge. In their efforts to complete this task, the anomalous materials team increased the power of the anti-mass spectrometer well above what they had used before. The additional power needed for this machine and other pieces of equipment led to issues across the whole of Black Mesa, where machinery malfunctioned and systems crashed. This morning of stress had set the whole team behind on the experiment, but Gordon missed it all. He was running late. At 8:47 AM, Gordon began his regular journey from his dormitory to the Sector C test labs on the Black Mesa Transit System. Upon finally arriving in the labs, he was mocked by his co-workers for arriving late, but he was also informed that the experiment was running behind, and they were still figuring out some kinks. As scheduled to be a materials handler for the experiment, Gordon put on his protective, hazardous environmental suit, and on his way down to the test chamber, he even visited the kitchen, and for some reason, turned on the microwave. This action would begin a grudge that would last for the next 20 years. Upon arrival in the observation deck of the test chamber, Gordon was updated on the situation by Isaac Kleiner and told to enter the test chamber where the stressful experiment would begin. Unknown to Gordon, his entire 27 years of life had led to this very moment that would change everything. Within the chamber, Gordon followed the instructions of his team in the observation bay, and as standard practice, he activated the anti-mass spectrometer and waited for the sample to come up from the ground. In his mind, this was a standard day. Following this, he pushed the crystal sample into the beam of the machine. Then, everything changed. As the crystal hit the beam of the anti-mass spectrometer, it shattered and flooded the chamber with exotic energy, and this eruption had cataclysmic side effects. All around him, Gordon watched as particles and violent bursts of energy struck out into the chamber. Unknown to him, this disaster had formed a resonance cascade where a hole had been ripped in space, where a bridge had been formed between Earth and the border world of Zen. This bridge in turn allowed the hostile flora and fauna of the border world to enter Earth in an attempt to claim it for themselves. In this chaos, Gordon suddenly found himself in darkness, and that was when he realized he had been teleported to Zen, and he saw up close the other life forms that existed out there in the universe. Before he could be attacked by these creatures, he was pulled back into the test chamber, and his new journey began. As Gordon recovered from the teleportation, he looked around him and saw just how much damage the resonance cascade had caused. As he navigated the Sector C test labs, he discovered the bodies of the victims of this catastrophe. These people had been his friends and co-workers, but luckily, he found Isaac, who had been injured, and Eli, who was trying to help him. Eli explained that the communication system had gone down and there was no way to call for help, and so he asked Gordon to reach the surface and bring back reinforcements. Here, he, just like the other people in this facility, worked his way to any exit he could find. But only minutes into his journey, he came upon a security guard firing at a scientist who had somehow merged with an alien creature. It was here that he realized that an alien invasion had begun and he had to be ready. So, Gordon picked up the first weapon he saw, a crowbar, and continued on his journey to escape the Black Mesa research facility. Without a functioning trans system, Gordon took to the halls and vents he knew well. In these dangerous, claustrophobic corridors, Gordon found himself continuously fighting for his life against the creatures he encountered. Headcrabs, barnacles, and vortigaunts to name a few. Each creature was different and more dangerous than the last. But the HEV suit he had worn to protect himself from the dangers of the anti-mass spectrometer, as well as his ability to teach himself how to fire any weapon he encountered, kept him safe. With the ability to fight off these forces, Gordon came across his peers that had barricaded themselves in safe locations where he helped them when he could. And then he heard of a military force that had arrived at Black Mesa to rescue them, the Hazardous Environmental Combat Unit. But when Gordon eventually encountered them, he was surprised to see them gun down the scientists instead of helping them. Then he realized they were here to not only take out the invading aliens, but also any witness to this event. So, going forward, Gordon had to fight against both of these hostile forces. On his path, Gordon killed many of the HECU as he navigated the sewers, the surface, and even the underground rail, to the point where this military force openly sought out Gordon by name just so they could have their vengeance on this scientist with a crowbar that had killed many of their own. Although he had turned into a warrior, Gordon still was a scientist and learned from his peers he met along the way that there was a science team hiding out in the Lambda complex that maybe knew of a way to reverse the resonance cascade. Following instructions, Gordon launched a rocket with a satellite attached to it that the scientists believed would close the link between Earth and Zen, and with this complete, he continued his journey towards Sector F. Following additional altercations with the HECU, one of which led to his capture and imprisonment in a trash compactor, Gordon discovered a secret part of Black Mesa where he learned the facility had actively brought back creatures from Zen and experimented with them. They in part had been responsible for this incident. Throughout this journey through the bowels of Black Mesa, Gordon had noticed a man just out of reach watching him from afar. From his emotionless stare, it appeared he was just there to watch him and not help. Finally, Gordon arrived at the Lambda complex and was told by the remaining team here that the reason the rift between Earth and Zen had not closed was because a powerful force had kept it open from the other side. As Gordon had truly shown his ability to adapt and survive in unwinnable situations against both human and alien forces, he accepted the challenge to enter a portal to Zen to kill the creature on the other side so that the rift would close. After arriving in Zen, Gordon fought past the hostile flora and fauna and eventually came upon the lair of the Nylanth, the creature that had ordered its entire army to invade Earth, and after a brutal fight, the creature died where its hold over Earth was released. Gordon then once again found himself teleported, but not to a place he recognized. He found himself standing in front of the shady figure he had noticed watching him from a distance through his whole journey since this catastrophe had begun. The figure, the G-Man, explained to Gordon that he had been watching him and he and his employers were impressed with his limitless potential. He had survived against the odds in impossible situations and they wanted him to work for them. Due to the secretive nature of the G-Man and his employers, Gordon still had no idea what he was being recruited for or what he would have to do, but still, the G-Man gave him a choice: join them or be placed in a fight he had no chance of winning. And so, Gordon accepted the G-Man's offer and entered a green portal into nothingness. Out of nothing, Gordon found himself still within stasis, a timeless void outside of reality. Then, the G-Man appeared once again. It seemed that the job he had been hired for was about to start. As he listened to the G-Man, he was told to rise and shine from his rest, and that his hour had come. After this, Gordon found himself somehow on a train entering a city. Confused, he left the train and saw the director of Black Mesa on a large television screen, welcoming the occupants of this train into City 17. Something was very different about the world, but he could not figure it out. Unknown to Gordon, the moment between entering the green portal and arriving on this train had seemed like mere seconds, when in reality, it had been 2 decades. The G-Man had simply kept him in stasis and frozen his conscious thought. As Gordon navigated the train station, he was ordered to follow some sort of police officer after he had attempted to enter a gate that had closed on him. After following the officer into an office, he took off his mask and revealed himself to be Barney, his friend from Black Mesa. Following this, Barney began a video call to Dr. Isaac Kleiner, and it was a relief to see that they had both survived the Black Mesa incident. Over the next few hours, Gordon learned that he had been gone for much longer than he had thought, and after his actions during the Resonance Cascade, he had, in a way, become revered as a legend. In his absence, the world had been taken over by the Combine, a multi-dimensional alien empire that had used the side effects of the Resonance Cascade to conquer Earth in a mere 7 hours. After escaping the train station, Gordon made his way to Dr. Kleiner's lab, a secret resistance base against this alien force, and on his way there, he met Alex Vance, the daughter of Eli. But now, she was no longer a child, she was an adult. The Resistance had been waiting for a sign to fight back against the Combine, and they believed this to be Gordon's sudden return. After arriving at Kleiner's lab, he was given back his HEV suit that Isaac had kept and refined over the years. To jumpstart this revolution and to put Gordon's brain and brawn to use, Isaac decided that they needed to send him to another Resistance base to work with Dr. Eli Vance, who had also survived the Black Mesa incident. But to get there, they needed to teleport Gordon and Alex. As trouble appeared to follow Gordon, the teleportation attempt failed on his turn, where he was propelled through space into various locations across the wasteland. Unfortunately, one of these locations was the office of Dr. Wallace Breen, who, upon eye contact, instantly recognized him as the scientist that had disappeared during the Black Mesa incident. In Gordon's absence, Wallace had allied himself with the Combine and had become an enemy of the Resistance. And on a more interesting note, the Vortigaunt species who Gordon had fought during the Black Mesa incident had also joined the Resistance and saw Gordon as the person that would free everyone from the Combine reign. Wallace believed that Gordon could be a threat to this new way of life, and so he alerted the Combine of this potential threat, where a manhunt began. After the teleportation sequence ended, Gordon found himself outside of Dr. Kleiner's lab, where he discovered that he would have to make his way to Eli's lab on foot. Luckily, Barney had somehow managed to save his crowbar, and after handing it to him, he went off. As the symbol for revolution, Gordon met many Resistance members on his path, where they all regarded him as the free man, the person that would help the Resistance reclaim their planet from the Combine. The man with the symbol of the rebellion on his chest, the Lambda sign. After many battles, Gordon eventually arrived at Black Mesa East, the home of Dr. Eli Vance, But unknown to them all, there was a spy in their midst, Dr. Judith Mossman. Judith was aware of Gordon. She also knew that she had lost out on the position at Black Mesa to him, and in some aspects still held a grudge. Judith had a line of contact with Wallace Breen, and as Gordon reunited with his old friend Eli, she let the Combine know where Gordon was. Shortly after, the Combine raided Black Mesa East, but to Gordon's luck, he managed to escape, but Eli was captured. And so, Gordon traveled the wasteland to the Combine's infamous prison of Nova Prospekt to rescue him with Alex. This rescue attempt was unsuccessful as Judith managed to teleport herself and Eli away into a secure Combine location. To make the situation even worse, the teleporter was incredibly unstable. With no moment to spare, Alex recharged the teleporter and they escaped Nova Prospekt just before the unstable teleporter exploded, where it took out the prison with it. As Alex and Gordon arrived in Dr. Kleiner's lab in City 17, he told them that the destruction of Nova Prospekt had occurred a week before and that they must have been stuck in a slow teleport loop. The destruction of a major Combine stronghold and the believed death of 2 strong resistance members had led the resistance to start the uprising. If Nova Prospekt could be taken down, then other Combine strongholds also could. As Alex and Gordon believed that Eli had been sent to the Citadel, the home of Wallace Breen and the center for all Combine activity in the region, Gordon led the resistance to the Citadel with the help of Barney as they took back the city, block by block. After approaching the Citadel, Gordon entered it and allowed himself to be captured just so he could reach the office of Wallace Breen. Here, he was reunited with Wallace, Judith, Eli, and a newly captured Alex. Wallace appeared to be aware of some sort of control that loomed over Gordon, and that his skill set had essentially been used by them. Of course, they were both aware of the G-Man and his mysterious practices. After a confrontation between Judith and Wallace, Gordon was set free where he chased down Wallace in his goal to free humanity from the Combine's reign. During this showdown, Gordon managed to destroy the Dark Fusion Reactor as Wallace opened a portal to the Combine overworld. The destruction of this reactor had a violent side effect where energy surged from the top of the tower. As this wave of energy came towards Gordon and Alex, time stopped and the G-Man appeared once again. It appeared that Gordon had somehow done exactly what the G-Man had wanted him to do, and as he had completed his task, he was once again plucked out of reality. The G-Man explained that he was impressed by his work and he had received tempting offers for his services. This time, the G-Man did not give Gordon the illusion of choice, and instead placed him back into stasis, where he hoped to keep him for his next task. In the darkness of stasis, Gordon woke up to find members of the Vortigaunt species breaking him out of the G-Man's prison. As they worked to complete their task, the G-Man entered, but he was unable to stop them. Then, Gordon awoke on Earth again. This time, not a lot of time had passed, and he was reunited with Alex. Over their adventure together, they had grown extremely close, and they would have many more battles ahead. The destruction of the Dark Fusion Reactor at the top of the Citadel had left the entire structure in meltdown, and it had also cut off the Combine's connection to Earth. This is what the Resistance needed. But the Combine were also waiting for the Citadel to explode so that this energy surge would send a distress message to the Combine overworld and begin the formation of a superportal. With his aim to stop this from happening, Gordon re-entered the Citadel with Alex and secured the core of the Citadel. just so they and the refugees still stuck in City 17 would have enough time to escape the city before its inevitable explosion. And during their time in the Citadel, Alex and Gordon discovered the coordinates of the Combine overworld and a message from Judith Mossman on their system, which they stole. Then, in a race against time, they escaped the city as it exploded. With the fall of City 17, the Resistance had moved to another base out in the wasteland, White Forest, and with the information they had stolen from the Citadel, Alex and Gordon made their way there to play their part in the closing of the super portal. But the Combine were aware of the information they had stolen and attempted to stop them on multiple occasions, one of which led to a brutal assault on Alex. But to her luck, the Vortigaunt were close by and helped them on their journey. Eventually, Gordon and Alex arrived at White Forest and helped defend it against desperate Combine attacks as the Resistance scientists developed a rocket with an attached relay device to close the forming super portal, effectively mirroring the actions of Gordon during the Resonance Cascade when he had launched a rocket to sever the link between Earth and Xen. One of the scientists working on this rocket was Dr. Arne Magnusson, who still remembered his last moment with Gordon before the Resonance Cascade. The moment when Gordon had microwaved his casserole to the point of explosion. But Gordon had led the Resistance to this point, and so Arne in a way forgave him for the casserole incident. In a tense fight, Gordon and the Resistance fought against the Striders and Hunters that breached White Forest's perimeter. These creatures had just one goal: to destroy the rocket. At this point, Gordon had survived so many impossible situations, and he once again used his skills to fight against these creatures and gave the scientists the time they needed to complete the rocket. After another victory, Gordon, Alex, Eli, and Arne launched the rocket and watched as it flew towards the forming super portal. In this moment, Eli took Gordon aside and thanked him for all of his work and told him that he could not have been prouder of him even if he was his own son. As the rocket hit the super portal, it closed and gave humanity their chance to completely reclaim their planet from the leftover Combine forces on Earth. These forces were now cut off from the Combine overworld and had to rely on each other without backup. Although the super portal had closed, the Resistance still had urgent issues they had to deal with, one of these being the rescue of Dr. Judith Mossman from the north after she had discovered the Borealis, a potentially extremely powerful piece of technology that could aid the Resistance in their mission to completely rid the Combine from the planet. So, Gordon and Alex made their way to a hangar, accompanied by Eli, who wanted to wave them off. Unknown to them, the Combine had not given up and were desperate to stop any more Resistance wins. So, two Combine advisors struck the hangar and attacked the trio. To their luck, a Resistance robot, Dog, dropped in from the ceiling and helped to stop this attack. But there were still casualties. They were one person down, but they did not have time to mourn the lost. There was still a mission to complete in the north, and Gordon was the man to do it. The man with a crowbar.
Here, we explore the lore and story behind Operation Counter-Strike in Quake. Within the twisted, interconnected web of worlds and dimensions of Quake, Shub-Niggurath watched over all of her realms. This godlike being was an old one, a powerful ancient being that had existed for aeons. From her pit, Shub-Niggurath commanded her children to invade and conquer the world she sensed. The god herself could not move, she simply instructed. Over her time in existence, Shub-Niggurath was responsible for the invasion of countless worlds and dimensions. Her children were her soldiers, and as new worlds were taken over and absorbed into the Quake realms, the occupants of these worlds became mad and subservient to her. Her reach impacted untold worlds, and she was given so many names. The All-Mother, the Witch Goddess, and the Hell-Mother were just 3 of many. As the divine ruler of the realms of Quake, the Witch Goddess teleported her children across space from within her pit. She could not move, and some would have viewed this as a weakness. Yet, she was not only under the protection of her children, her skin was also impenetrable. In essence, unless an enemy was able to discover a way to destroy her from the inside, Shub-Niggurath was immortal and undying. Under her control, the realms of Quake held great secrets, beasts, magic, and power. Just 4 of these realms were the Dimension of the Doomed, the Realm of Black Magic, the Netherworld, and the Elderworld. These 4 worlds each contained an eldritch rune of incredible force. The Rune of Earth Magic held the basic foundation for all arcane power. The Rune of Black Magic held the abilities of the darker magics, and it was rumoured that it also whispered secrets of the history of the mysterious Shub-Niggurath. The Rune of Hell Magic burned with raw energy and kept secret the most horrid of magical abilities. Finally, the Rune of Elder Magic held the power beyond good and evil. The Quake dimension simply existed with their gods, horrors, and mystery. Outside of these realms also existed a world that had not encountered the chaos of Quake, magic, or the terror of the gods. Earth. In their short time on Earth, humanity had come so far in their understanding of the universe and its laws. Through observation, research, and development, new technologies were developed frequently. Advanced facilities were constructed and dedicated to the exploration of specific scientific fields, and the youngest minds dreamed of what was possible with the new knowledge they attained. The Cornudas Transport Research Complex was a very remote secret facility, a 90-minute drive away from anywhere. While some of this complex was visible above ground, the majority of it was constructed below. Within, the head scientist, Dr. Gilman, and his team had explored some of the most experimental fields of science, teleportation and biological adaptation to name just 2. The nature of this research was also deemed dangerous, to protect the complex from outsiders and to protect the scientists from any part of their work that could go wrong. Soldiers and guard dogs were used to keep the peace. Although a scientist at the complex, Dr. Gilman had a lot of power. Over his years of work, his research into teleportation technology advanced immensely. By the 1990s, a slipgate complex had been constructed. Even so, the activities that occurred within were kept top secret. Inside, Gilman and his team had learned how to generate earthquakes and used their power to disrupt the time continuum to activate slipgate portals. This was an incredible breakthrough. The use of these slipgates were at first tested to transport human and cargo across locations. Within Shub-Niggurath's pit, this old one sensed a new dimension, a world for her to conquer. A connection to Earth had come to her, so she plotted and used her power to connect her slipgates to Earth's. After the continued use of the slipgates, Gilman discovered that they led to different locations, different dimensions. The team had discovered the realms of Quake, also known as the Dreamlands. Unknown to them, they did not know of the horrors inside. This was groundbreaking, and to enhance their understanding of these new realms, Gilman ordered for a complex to be constructed on the other side of this slipgate. The dimension, however, the Dimension of the Doomed, was also home to hostile creatures. Having peered into this new land, Dr. Gilman connected with Shub-Niggurath, and his mind slowly corrupted.
he had become a part of the Dark Young, almost a child and follower of Shub. In his human form, he attempted to understand the Old One he had encountered. As time passed, Marines were sent into the lower levels of the complex. They helped protect the team that worked there, but those above ground noticed that when some of the soldiers returned, they expressed sudden outbursts of fear and rage. The base counselor, Tacito Flores, worried for his clients, but he was kept in the dark of what was happening in the labs below. Commander Rice also showed signs of instability in which he suffered with constant night terrors. They had begun just after his first inspection of Dr. Gilman's lab. It is likely that he had looked at the eldritch letters of an Old One, and these night terrors were actually visions of the Dreamlands. In his second session, Flores noticed that Rice's mental state had deteriorated even further. He stated, "We are the Dark Young." That the other Marines had also been fitted with bad blood and bad bionics. He had even had bionics attached to his sternum. Rice had become a dreamer, a person whose interaction with an Old One had connected them to the Dreamlands. Unknown to him, his fate was certain. Under the thrall of Shub-Niggurath, he would create a new region in the Dreamlands from the darkest parts of his mind, or he would be consumed by them and transform into an Elder God. Dr. Gilman's mind had been corrupted by Shub-Niggurath, and the other workers in the lower levels had also been twisted. Shub-Niggurath felt that the humans were weak enough and that it was time to begin her invasion. Back in the complex, Dr. Gilman's mind finally snapped and he entered the slipgate to ascend and be one with Shub-Niggurath. A call at 4 AM in the morning meant that something terrible had happened. Ranger was a veteran Marine. He had served in Vietnam and he knew how to handle himself. He said goodbye to his wife Annie and his children and left. By 5:30 AM, Ranger reached the facility and entered. Commander Rice was under the influence of an Old One, yet Ranger did not notice. The commander explained that an enemy, codenamed Quake, had used the slipgates they had developed to send through death squads to kill, steal, and kidnap. That Quake was planning to unleash his real army, whatever that was. "You're our best man," Rice explained. "This is Operation Counter-Strike and you're in charge." As Ranger scouted the region, he heard shots back at the base. To stop this invasion, maybe he and his squad could enter the slipgate and reach the enemy. To his horror, he discovered that the enemy, Quake, had already claimed the lives of every Marine, and Commander Rice was nowhere to be seen. He did not know what Quake was, but it had to be stopped to save Earth. As a dreamer and thrall of Shub-Niggurath, Rice had not called Ranger to the base to stop the invasion. He had instead called him as another sacrifice to Shub-Niggurath. Having completed his task, Rice entered the slipgate into the dimension of the doomed and he was consumed from within. His dream created the Elder God, Goroth, and his mind became trapped within him. As the only survivor of this corruption and massacre, Ranger was forced to begin Operation Counter-Strike alone, so he entered a slipgate into the unknown. Within the lair of Shub-Niggurath, the All-Mother saw how the minds of these mortals had been twisted to eviscerate all life on Earth so that her offspring could live there. This Old One planned to secure the 4 runes to use their power. As Ranger entered the slipgate, he found himself inside of the base Dr. Gilman had constructed within this realm. It was apparent that the team had sought to explore the dimension of the doomed, but they had grown mad during their time here. Whatever the leader of this invasion was, Quake, it had the power to twist minds. Ranger encountered the corrupted Marines and Rottweilers that had once protected the facility, now under the influence of something greater.
Though there were many more of them, the veteran defended himself well against the fallen. Further into this dimension, the Marine traversed through interesting locations, some of which were the Castle of the Damned, the Gloomkeep, and then he arrived within the House of Chthon. Not only did he have to fight against human and dogs, but he also encountered the entities of this realm. Scrags, ogres, fiends and shamblers to name a few. Just in front of a pit of lava, Ranger approached and picked up the rune of the Dimension of the Doomed, the rune of Earth Magic. However, as he did this, the guardian of this realm appeared from the lava. This Outlander was an invader in its land. He had also stolen a rune. Enraged, Chthon launched fiery projectiles at Ranger, but they missed. During this, the Marine discovered and activated an electric trap. Upon multiple strikes of electricity, Chthon fell and returned to the lava. Ranger had been lured to this dimension as just another sacrifice, only to have risen as a powerful threat to Shub-Niggurath's plan. In his hand, he felt the power of the rune of Earth Magic, and as he looked at it, it flooded his mind with knowledge. He learned that this was just one of the dimensions of the lands of Quake, and the Slipgate would allow him access to the others. Most importantly, there were 3 other runes in 3 other lands. If he collected all 4, he would get access to the enemy, Quake, and have the opportunity to stop its invasion of Earth. With an actual plan in place, Ranger entered the Slipgate and found himself within the realm of black magic. This was a land of ancient castles and strange beasts. Throughout the Ogre Citadel, the Underearth, the Ebon Fortress, and many more, the Marine encountered and fought with Death Knights, fiends, and zombies to name just a few. Then he reached the dismal Oubliettes, the home of the second rune, the rune of black magic. This was a dangerous region, but having discovered a rocket launcher, grenade launcher, and a double-barreled shotgun, and various other weapons on this journey, Ranger was able to destroy the creatures of this dimension. The most challenging of all were the Vors, spider-esque monsters who had the ability to launch a destructive spiked homing missile. As Ranger picked up the rune of black magic, it throbbed evilly in his hand and flooded his mind with more knowledge. He was shown that the leader of the dimensions of Quake was Shub-Niggurath, the evil Hellmother whose terrible plotting had led to so much death and horror, but she was not invulnerable. With an actual name for his enemy, Ranger passed through a slipgate into the next realm. The Netherworld was a hellish realm. It offered Ranger the ability to once again test his combat skills as he fought against the same creatures that had plagued the Dimension of the Doomed and the Dimension of Black Magic. He explored the Vaults of Zin, Satan's Dark Delight, the Wind Tunnels, and then eventually he reached the Chambers of Torment, an ancient temple with lakes of fire. This was a particularly challenging region as many Vors wandered the hallways. Despite their power, Ranger's will was stronger. As the Marine held the rune of hell magic in his hand, he felt its heat scorch his flesh. The rune showed him just how powerful Shub-Niggurath was, what she had done, and what she planned for his homeworld. This only made him more determined to take the witch goddess down. Behind the location of the rune, Ranger encountered another slipgate and found himself in the Elder World. The final rune was in this dimension, and Ranger searched for it in the sewage system, the Tower of Despair, the Palace of Hate, and then he came across Azure Agony. Once again protected by Vors and the other guardians of this realm, Ranger reached the rune and held it in his hand. The rune of Elder Magic pulsated and showed him more of Shub-Niggurath, that she planned to use the runes herself to clear all life off Earth and bring her own foul offspring to live there. All the creatures Ranger had fought against were her descendants, controlled by her. Having acquired all 4 runes, Ranger used them to blast open the gateway to Shub-Niggurath's pit. If he succeeded, he would be regarded as a savior to his planet. If he failed, the runes told him that it would be as if he never existed, for the Shub-Niggurath had immense power. The dimensions of Quake existed not only across space, but also across time. The threat of Ranger loomed in the hallways of her lair, and the witch goddess sensed that he could stop her plan. With her godlike powers, Shub-Niggurath summoned her children to fight the invader and defend her. These creatures were nothing in comparison to the will of the human and the runes he wielded. Then he reached the inner lair of the beast. Across a lake of lava, Ranger looked at Shub-Niggurath in all her glory, a strong body with 3 large tentacles. Yet his battle was not over. The Hellmother could not fight, but the Shamblers and Vors she had teleported into this location could. Vors launched their homing missiles at the human as Shamblers charged at him. With everything he had, and Operation Counter-Strike as the only thing that mattered to save his planet, Ranger destroyed the Vors and Shamblers. His weapons, however, had no effect on this elder god, but he did notice that a floating, spiky orb moved around this chamber. It even entered the beast. After some observation and experimentation, he also noticed that a slipgate was tethered to the orb. This was what he needed to take her down. As the orb moved into Shub-Niggurath, Ranger entered the slipgate and instantly appeared within the witch goddess. His sudden arrival in a compact location destroyed the All-Mother from the inside, and it was done. The enemy, Quake, he had been tasked to destroy, was dead. Shub-Niggurath no longer had control over the dimensions of Quake. Sent to this dimension as a sacrifice, Ranger had proven his skill and cunning to be greater than the powers of Quake. Operation Counter-Strike had been completed, yet Shub-Niggurath was not the only god in the realms of Quake. Ranger had succeeded in his task, but this was just the start of a much greater war. Here we explore in the lore and story behind the betrayed Dark Lord, Davoth. In the beginning, there was only a void. Then, out of nothing, the first primeval being formed that would become known as Davoth. As he wandered the void of nothingness, land sprouted up and bloomed around him where the first realm formed. The first godlike being was awake, and this was the dawn of creation. Over time, Davoth learned to control his abilities, and with the immeasurable powers of creation, he continued to work on the realm around him, and named this first place in creation, Jakad. All alone, Davoth wished for company to share this realm with, and as he thought it, the first people were born to Jakad and the first civilization began. The people here had great ambition without restraint and lived in prosperity and wonder. Over time, they turned their home into a paradise with great wonders, cities and technology. Davoth looked at his creations from Jakad's capital city of Amora with pride that they had thrived on this land, but this perfect age would not last. He noticed that as time passed, his people grew frail and old, where their bodies of flesh failed to hold on to and sustain the undying spirits he had created for them, which ultimately led to their deaths, one by one. This confused Davoth as he did not understand why they did not have the same immortal properties that he had. He was a being of great power, but this was out of his ability to correct. With compassion for his mortals, Davoth decided to create a new species, a species that he could task with working together to discover a cure for mortality. To do this, he re-entered the void and formed a new realm in which he called Urdak. Within this realm, the first of the Maker species formed. This species were different to the people of Jakad. They were all connected through a hive mind, which allowed them to work on a single task in unison.
led by a leader, the Khan Maker, and guided by elevated versions of the Maker, labeled the Seraphim. Over time, all their knowledge, experiences, and discoveries helped them build upon the realm Davoth had formed for them, where they too created a place with magnificent technologies and wonders, with the ultimate aim to solve Davoth's problem. After many years of watching his mortals die, Davoth felt the anguish of each passing, but all he could do was wait for the Makers to find him a solution. In Urdak, the Makers eventually discovered the secrets of immortality, but over all of this time, they had observed Davoth's decline and deemed this information too dangerous to share, where they believed that if Davoth were to acquire it, then he would use it to eventually destroy everything. He was an incredibly powerful being, but they had also developed technology to counter him, and fearful that he would come for them if he discovered their secret, they chose to do something about it. After working in secret to perfect their technologies and warriors, the Makers struck and formed a seal around the realm of Jakad, blocking it off from the many realms that have formed over this time, safe from Davoth's power. Following this betrayal, Davoth's paradise became his prison. As a result of the betrayal of the Maker, Davoth became fueled by his anger and hatred for those who had gone against him, and he slowly transformed into the Dark Lord in his eternal fury. Not only did this have a physical effect on his body, but the stunning, luscious realm of Jakad and its population fell into horror, where the land and people became twisted and jaded. The Dark Lord had been tricked by his creations who had taken everything from him, and so he sought revenge as the paradise of Jakad became the horrific realm of hell. Although the Dark Lord was trapped, he refused to accept his situation, and so he pushed against the boundaries of his prison, where he was, on occasion, able to break through the seal to send through armies of demonic entities to the earthly dimensions. In doing this, Davoth and those untwisted by his fury discovered that the souls of the tortured victims of hell contained a power, which, when adapted, gave them everlasting life and increased power, Hell Essence. In a way, Davoth had discovered what he wanted all along, but it had come at a cost. With every defeat, Davoth grew more powerful as he absorbed the souls of his victims. From Urdak, the Makers sent armies to Hell in an attempt to stop Davoth, his rule of Hell, and the death of the population of the earthly realms he was able to break through too. Although the Dark Lord was powerful, the Makers had developed technology that would help them in this war. The Seraphim had discovered a way to take the life sphere of a being and store it, where it could do no harm and merely exist. These life spheres contain the memories, intelligence, and essential nature of the being. In another war, a Maker fought with Davoth on top of the Pyramid of the Lost within Hell. In this exchange, the creature was able to rip the Dark Lord's life sphere from his chest, where he also took a piece of his essence and power as Davoth's lifeless body fell to the ground. In this moment, this Maker absorbed the power of the Dark Lord and became a god in his own right, blessed with the same abilities the Dark Lord had. As a new god, this Maker became known as the Father. Although Davoth still was a living entity as a soul sphere, the Father refused to kill his creator and instead took his sphere to the Temple of Souls in Ingmar's Sanctum, a fragment of Urdak within Hell located at the top of a mountain protected by the Trial of Malagog. Only a fierce warrior would be able to come here, or someone with a direct connection from Urdak. Here, the Father believed that Davoth could exist but not interfere with the realms outside of Hell. And so, for thousands of years, Hell would grow more twisted under the newly rising Dark Lord of each age as Davoth waited to be freed, stuck in a life sphere. Over time, the Father would return to the Temple of Souls with new life spheres of flawed gods as he created new life and new realms. But the Dark Lord would still get his revenge, even if he had to wait thousands of years for it. After the fall of the Dark Lord, the Father returned to Urdak as a god. From this heavenly realm, the Makers explored the earthly realms and introduced themselves as godlike creatures to the species they encountered. In return for their worship and devotion, they offered these lesser beings sanctuary in the realm of Urdak upon their deaths. In this new age without the threat of Davoth, the Father and the Makers decided to rewrite the story of the dawn of creation and concealed any record they could find of the true story. In this scripture, they told the story of the Father, the first being who created all life, and that Urdak was in fact the first realm he created upon his formation. They went on to manipulate history where they stated that the Father created a second realm that he called Jakad. Here, he created his first god, Davoth, to watch over it. Over time, Davoth grew to love his people and help them build in this realm, full of ambition without restraint given to them by the Father. But as they grew, Davoth watched the people of this realm fall to their mortality, one by one. In Davoth's eyes, this was no paradise, it was torture, and here, the first seed of hell was planted. Seeing mortality as a curse, Davoth and his people sought a way to defeat death itself. His fear of being left alone in this realm plagued him, and so they stopped at nothing to become immortal just like he was, and those who did not participate in this search were punished harshly. In his almighty wisdom and power, the Father foresaw what was to come, the extinction of all creation at the hands of Davoth's endless pursuit of immortality for his people. So, the Father sealed off Jakad from the other realms to save them from Davoth's destructive path, which eventually led to the battle on top of the Pyramid of the Lost, where the Father ripped Davoth's life sphere from his chest. As the Father had once loved Davoth as one of his creations, he refused to destroy his life sphere against the wishes of his seraphim, Sama Maker, where he stored the life sphere of the Dark Lord in the Temple of Souls. This history of the Father as the Creator took aspects of reality and twisted it to suit the Father and his continued reign. This story of a Creator who ruled a heavenly realm and a Dark Lord of an evil realm would pass on to countless dimensions and species across time. But with the true story hidden by the Father and his followers, they would not know the truth, which fueled Davoth's eternal rage. Trapped inside of a life sphere on holy ground, Davoth still retained some of his abilities. Hell was the first dimension, and so, although sealed off, it was still connected to every other dimension. Over the ages, the Father created new species and places in the void for Urdak to watch over as Hell's armies attempted to break free. That was until the Father decided to take a step back from the physical realm and asked his most trusted seraphim to transform him into a life sphere. In Urdak, the seraphim had constructed the Luminarium, a holy temple home to machines that contained and manipulated the terrible energies of the very essence of life, and one of these was able to resurrect a life sphere back into a physical form. It was here that Sama Maker placed the Father's life sphere, where the Maker species came to this temple to worship him, and in return, his energy sustained their lives and watched over them. Over this time, the Khan Maker continued to lead the species as they explored the earthly realms, where they came across the planet of Argent Denur. Here, they guided the Argenta people who saw them as gods, and a civilization grew. But Hell was getting stronger, and the Father was aware of this. So, fearful of Davoth rising again, he asked Sama Maker to steal his life sphere from the Luminarium and take it to a place where no one would be able to find him in the Temple of Souls. Upon doing this, the people of Urdak were left without a god. Not only was this bad, but this also left the Maker species vulnerable. The Father's influence protected them from mental and physical decay, which they called transfiguration. So, without him, they also died and then were reborn with the help of their divine machinery. The father was also essential in choosing the next Khan Maker, leader of the Maker species, who were to be reborn every 10,000 years with the collective conscious soul data of every major Maker that had ever lived and died. But without the father to choose the next Khan Maker, the reigning Khan remained in power, where she became susceptible to corruption. Within the Temple of Souls, Davoth discovered that he could speak to those who were susceptible to corruption and began to whisper to them with dark thoughts, an invisible guiding hand in which even his victims were unaware of what he was doing. As the Dark Lord whispered to the Khan Maker, he led her to believe that a chosen one would destroy her, where a seed of doubt and paranoia was planted in her mind. Following this, she continued to listen to the manipulations of the Dark Lord, and under his instructions, she ordered those under her servitude to build the divinity machine in Taris Nabad, the capital city of Argent D'Nur. She explained that this machine would act as a holy rite for the Night Sentinels, the warriors of Argent D'Nur, to cleanse their impurity, but in reality, she only sought to find the chosen one she believed would end her reign as Khan. And to power this machine, the Dark Lord whispered to her the location of his essence that the father had stolen long ago as he ripped out his life sphere. While he stored the life sphere in the Tomb of Souls, he placed a piece of the Dark Lord's essence in the coffins of Urdak. Upon completion of the machine, one by one, the Khan Maker asked the Night Sentinels of Argent D'Nur to enter it, where it drove them mad and destroyed their souls. Unknown to her, this was the Dark Lord's plan, and she was destroying an army that had pledged their service to her, increasing her corruption. At one point, Davoth became aware of a human from planet Earth that had fought with the demons of hell, an extremely skilled warrior fueled by his hatred of demons, and he had mysteriously found himself stranded on the planet of Argent D'Nur. After meeting the priests here, he spoke of these demons, and instead of helping him, they placed him inside of the city's Colosseum, where they observed his impressive combat skills before placing him in one of their prisons. Shortly after, the armies of Hell managed to push through their seal into Argent D'Nur, where they attacked Taris Nabad. It appeared that this was what the father had fled to avoid, and a war began as the Night Sentinels fought back against Hell's forces. Throughout this, the Khan Maker was aware that she needed power to sustain the realm of Urdak and to stop the transfiguration process that now plagued her species without the father's presence. Then, she heard reports of a power source within Hell that could help, Hell Essence. As she and the Argenta priests experimented with this energy in secret, they discovered that if they combined the Hell Essence with Wraith energy, which the population of Argent D'Nur had already been using, they could create an even more powerful form of energy, in which they dubbed Argent Energy. The issue was that the Hell energy came from the torture of souls. Regardless, she believed she needed this energy to save her species, and so she sent Argenta slaves to Hell in secret to build factories to refine Argent energy. With this, she could power Urdak, and the Night Sentinels could fight back against Hell's forces on an even battleground, but at the cost of tortured souls. On the eve of the Black Star, Sama Maker, at this point acting as an advisor to the Khan Maker, suddenly found his faith in her clouded. Unknown to him, this was yet another one of the Dark Lord's whispers. In this, he was told that the Khan Maker would lead them to ruin, and subsequently was guided to release the human prisoner and place him inside of the divinity machine, but this time he reversed the polarity of it, giving him power instead of destroying him. As the machine activated, the human, Doom Guy, absorbed the essence of the Dark Lord that powered it and gained incredible abilities. In a way, he became another primeval, a godlike being powered by the Dark Lord and fueled by a rage for demons, where he became known as the Doomslayer. The Dark Lord's plan was working. He now had a warrior powerful enough to fight with the Khan Maker and other powerful beings. He just needed to wait for the Doomslayer to turn against them. The Doomslayer hated all evil, and those that the Dark Lord had corrupted would soon meet their end. As the war between Hell and Argent D'Nur continued, the Night Sentinels discovered the slave factories that the Khan Maker had set up. At this point, the Doomslayer had joined the Night Sentinels and fought alongside them. At a pivotal point, the Argenta priests explained that there was a place in Hell that the Night Sentinels could use to end this war, and after arriving here, the army found that they had been betrayed by the priests as Hell's army swarmed them. One by one, the soldiers fell until only the Doomslayer fought, a being so powerful that they were unable to defeat. So, they lured him into the Kadinga Sanctum and trapped him inside of a sarcophagus, where he would wait to be freed. The Dark Lord had created a domino effect in which he hoped would lead to the Doomslayer taking out those who had betrayed him. Over time, the Doomslayer was released from his prison and he fought with many demons, fueling his rage. Following his release, he destroyed the Well, an Argent energy power source developed by the Khan Maker and the Argenta priests, who now went by Hell priests, which stopped the flow of power Urdak and the Maker species needed to thrive. In response to this, the Khan Maker led an assault on planet Earth with the aim to use the souls of the humans to replace the energy source the Doomslayer had destroyed. This eventually led to the Doomslayer entering Urdak, where he fought with the Khan Maker. As a being powered by the essence of the Dark Lord, he was able to stop her reign of terror. In her haste to take Earth, she released the Icon of Sin before her confrontation, which removed the seal that protected Urdak from Hell. Due to this, Davoth had another win. His demons could now enter the Holy Realm. With the Khan Maker dead at the hands of the Doomslayer and Urdak now overridden by demons, he continued to whisper his dark truths to the corrupted. On his path of hatred, the Doomslayer managed to complete the trial of Malagog and discovered the life sphere of Davoth. He understood that by Hell's law, if the Dark Lord was defeated in ritual combat, any demon outside his realm would be destroyed, and with the ultimate aim to destroy evil and save the realms outside of Hell, he destroyed the life sphere of the Father and took Davoth's sphere to a now corrupted Urdak so that he could restore his body in the Luminarium. Although the Father's life sphere had been destroyed, Sama Maker had previously transformed a part of him into an AI system called Vega to watch over Earth, hidden away from the view of the Dark Lord, just without his essence of power. After the ritual, the Dark Lord found himself in a physical form, mirroring his greatest warrior. Hell needed a strong leader to guide them, and what better form to do this than the Doomslayer? Here, the Doomslayer attempted to shoot him, but this holy place did not allow blood to be spilled, and so Davoth ordered the Doomslayer to meet him within Hell in the capital city of Amora where they could have their fight. The Doomslayer had fulfilled the goals Davoth had set for him, but in order to have his true vengeance, the Doomslayer also had to die. As he returned to his realm in physical form, Davoth prepared for battle. He did not have the abilities he used to have, but the first people of Amora had managed to remain untwisted by Hell thanks to the power of Hell Essence. In this time, they had grown the city and technologies even more, where they used their knowledge to build a mech suit for the Dark Lord. As the Doomslayer arrived and fought with Davoth, the forces of Hell battled around them with the armies of the other realms as the final confrontation between good and evil commenced, where Davoth told the truth of the dawn of creation. After a brutal fight between these two godlike beings, Davoth fell to the Slayer and he accepted his fate. The Doomslayer had beaten him fairly in combat, and so he had the right to finish him. The Dark Lord was evil, but he was honorable. In his final moment, he asked the Doomslayer if there was anything he wanted to say to his creator, and in response, the Doomslayer said no as he struck his chest, killing him. Here, we explore Half-Life's biggest mystery through the lore, story, and theories behind the G-Man. The border world of Xen offered incredible power, connection, and sanctuary to whoever or whatever controlled it, shifting across realities and dimensions. Xen connected to many worlds, becoming home to creatures like barnacles, the Nylanth, the Vortigaunt, and Houndai. Nothing was native to Xen. It picked up life as new worlds connected to it. As one of these, the Nylanth, a being of incredible power, found sanctuary and dominance in Xen after its species was wiped out by the Combine, a union of nightmares. Back on Earth, around the 1960s or 70s, the Black Mesa Research Facility discovered Xen through teleportation experiments. Survey teams were sent to explore, document, and bring back samples, despite the dangers. The crystals they found here were composed of both normal and exotic matter, the latter consisting of antimass. To study these, Dr. Rosenberg designed the anti-mass spectrometer, which was constructed in Sector C for the anomalous materials team to use. During this period, the extent of the G-Man and his employer's influence over Black Mesa's discovery of Xen remains unknown. He was part of a secret interdimensional organization that worked in the shadows. At the top were the employers. Below them, the agents. This is the position the G-Man held, and below them, the soldiers hired to complete tasks. These soldiers, stored in stasis outside of space-time after they were hired, were unaware that they were pawns in a larger game. Their contracts sold to the highest bidder for their services. What the currency or goals were remain mostly unknown, yet as the story continued, several of these goals and hired agents were revealed, showcasing the G-Man and his employer's ability to manipulate humanity, space, and time. As certain events had to occur to complete their contracts, agents such as the G-Man watched from a distance to intervene if necessary if deviations from a plan happened. Essentially, he was a glorified babysitter. The actions of the G-Man are pretty much unknown before around May of a year in the early 2000s. After this point, his appearances became more prominent and direct as his mysterious employers had a goal in mind. They wanted control of the border world of Xen, a goal that would change everything. With power over time, they saw a timeline in which they could make this possible. They just had to nudge certain people to make this a reality. The G-Man got his name from his appearance as a regular G-Man. He was secret, authoritative, and wore a suit. He appeared to be a member of the United States government with a high security clearance. He was known to and had some sway over Dr. Wallace Breen, the administrator of Black Mesa. Regardless of how he obtained this position, he used the power to his advantage. His briefcase contained an identity card, a handgun, pencils, and a sheet of paper. He appeared to be human with a high level of control, or something that mimicked the appearance of a human. This is something that will be explored later. To secure control over Xen, the Nylanth had to be taken out. In order to do this, several things had to be set in motion. On May the 3rd, the G-Man traveled to the Santiago military base. From reports of some of the Marines there, they believed he was from a secret branch of the government in search of recruits. To those in charge, he requested a team trained in indoor strategic combat for a mission at the Black Mesa Research Facility. A few days later, on May 7th, he returned to the base and appeared to focus his attention mostly on one of the recruits, Corporal Adrian Shepard. To Shepard, he looked more like a lawyer or insurance agent. On May the 9th, the Marines were told that they would spend the next week training at the combat simulation facility for a mission, and from rumors, they heard the name Black Mesa. With the Hazardous Environment Combat Unit in training, on around May 11th, a Xenian crystal sample, GG-3883, was delivered to Black Mesa. According to Dr. Rosenberg and Dr. Keller, it was delivered under mysterious circumstances. It has not been confirmed who this was delivered by, but it is believed it was brought in by the G-Man. Dr. Colette Green later evaluated this sample and discovered that it was the purest and largest sample they had acquired so far from Xen. Because of this, the Office of the Administrator ordered that it replace sample EP0021 in an upcoming experiment. The Office of the Administrator also ordered that to study the sample properly, because of its size and purity, they would have to violate the normal anomalous materials handling protocol and adjust the safety parameters of the anti-mass spectrometer. This order put stress on the team as they attempted to prepare for their test in time. As May 15th arrived, it was confirmed to the HECU that their upcoming mission would take place at the Black Mesa Research Facility. They just had to wait for it to happen, whatever it was. Corporal Adrian Shepard would also be on this team. With the crystal sample GG-3883 in place to be tested, the HECU prepared to be sent out for an event, and an even more secret team, the Black Ops, were on standby for another secret mission. Over in Xen, the Nylanth appeared to also be aware of something on the horizon. This creature had escaped the torture of the Combine and sought out a new home to hide from them. It was also aware of the G-Man, that he was not a man at all, but something else. It was aware of the human survey teams that had traveled to Xen and waited for an opportunity to send through its slave army of Vortigaunt to claim Earth for itself. There were also other factors at play. Dr. Gordon Freeman was scheduled to deliver the crystal sample into the beam of the anti-mass spectrometer. This was essential to their plan. Race X would discover Earth through Xen and various other smaller factors that may or may not have also been manipulated through the efforts of this secret interdimensional organization. The G-Man and his employers had put everything in place they needed to claim Xen. They just had to make sure everything played out as they planned. A regular experiment in Sector C of Black Mesa was normally stressful, yet with a sample of a much larger size and purity, the anomalous materials team were under significantly more pressure. The administrator wanted conclusive results for this sample, and to achieve this, they had adapted the safety parameters and decided to boost the anti-mass spectrometer's power to 105%. It was a gamble, but they needed the extra resolution. This gamble, they feared, could trigger a resonance cascade, but that only had a small chance of occurring. Several scientists were completely against these adjustments, but were forced to proceed. As the G-Man arrived on site, he observed as blackouts knocked out entire regions of Black Mesa as a result of the additional power requirements. On his tram ride in, he took note of Dr. Gordon Freeman, someone who would be invaluable to the plan ahead. As he arrived in Sector C, he had a heated discussion with one of the scientists. While it is unknown what this argument was actually about, as it was muffled to anyone outside of the room, It is believed that it was related to the increased power usage of the anti-mass spectrometer. Increasing it from 90% to 105% was a risky move. Despite the complaints of the team, the experiment moved ahead. Freeman entered the test chamber, activated the anti-mass spectrometer, and waited for the crystal sample to arrive. Meanwhile, the G-Man approached a very cautious Dr. Eli Vance and warned him to prepare for unforeseen consequences. Eli had thought about stopping the experiment, but even in this moment, he chose to follow the orders of the administrator anyway. As foreseen, the G-Man watched as Dr. Gordon Freeman pushed the crystal sample, GG-3883, into the beam of the anti-mass spectrometer, and it shattered. The exotic energy inside flooded the chamber with the energy the anomalous materials team had sought to analyze. This chain reaction triggered a resonance cascade that ripped open a tear in space between Earth and Zen. Just as planned by the G-Man and his employers, the Nylanth teleported its slave army of Vortigaunts through to Earth inside the Black Mesa facility to secure it as a new home, safe from the Combine. With Zen connected to Earth, the G-Man turned his attention to Dr. Gordon Freeman. The right man in the wrong place could make all the difference in the world, and this scientist would ensure their control over Zen. As Gordon began his journey across Black Mesa, the G-Man came across the daughter of Dr. Eli Vance, Alex. Her mother had already died in this disaster as the Vortigaunts and creatures of Zen had fallen into the facility. As he looked at her, he saw something special. His employers told him that she was just a mere child of no practical use to anyone, but he thought differently. The G-Man ignored the worries of his employers and plucked her out of Black Mesa to safety. Over the following hours, the personnel of Black Mesa were massacred by headcrabs, bullsquid, barnacles, vortigaunt, and the other hostile lifeforms of Zen. Meanwhile, Gordon Freeman discovered that he was a natural with a crowbar and the various other weaponry he found on his journey through Black Mesa. All he wanted to do was reach the surface to call for help. With Gordon on track, the G-Man's second plan came into play. The HECU were alerted that it had happened and they were dispatched to Black Mesa. Unfortunately, the Osprey holding Adrian was shot down, and when he awoke, he was completely unaware of what his orders actually were, as they were planned to have been given to him upon his arrival. The HECU were ordered to clean up the experiment that had gone wrong at Black Mesa. This meant they had to kill every alien life form and any witness with knowledge of what had happened there. As the G-Man was behind the arrival of this team, it could be suggested that he and his employers had planned the Black Mesa incident to be a self-contained event. Yet, as the hours passed, the situation deteriorated rapidly. If anything, maybe there were consequences that even the G-Man and his employers had not foreseen. From a distance, the G-Man watched Gordon and Adrian closely. Gordon grew more confident and survived several events. He ran, he thought, he shot, and he lived through scenarios that had killed many of his co-workers. Even after the arrival of the HECU, Gordon took them out one by one. As for Adrian, he showed the ability to adapt and survive against all odds, traits that reminded the G-Man of himself. As a result of the continued arrival of Zenian reinforcements and Freeman's killing spree, the HECU decided to pull out and save whoever they could. Having heard the call, Adrian raced to the evacuation point. However, Adrian still had a role to play as a pawn in the plan of the G-Man and his employers. So, the G-Man closed the hangar door that led to the Osprey, and he was left behind. As each minute passed, the Zenian forces overwhelmed and dominated the hallways of Black Mesa. Gordon was eventually told that something on Zen held open the tear between their world and the border world. Having survived deadly scenarios and against the odds, he was sent through to Zen to take it out. In a baptism of fire, a simple scientist had been forged into a soldier under the watchful eye and guidance from afar of the G-Man. With Gordon on Zen as planned, the G-Man once again turned his attention to Corporal Adrian Shepard. He and the few survivors of the HECU had come across the Black Ops, a safety net sent in to rid Black Mesa of all alien life and human survivors. Adrian also discovered the thermonuclear device they had brought with them to do this. To give himself and the other survivors a chance to escape, he disarmed the device. However, shortly after, the G-Man reactivated it. Each stage of his incident appeared to have been meticulously planned, and these little deviations were fixed quickly. Adrian later killed the Gene Worm, one of the most important members of the Race X species, a goal he had been guided towards since the G-Man had spotted him that day at the Santiago military base. Upon its death, a portal storm pulled Adrian into somewhere new. The G-Man looked down at his recruit in what appeared to be an osprey flying through the New Mexico desert. In the distance, the thermonuclear device exploded and eradicated all life in Black Mesa. A successful cleanse of those who had any idea of what had happened. The osprey then brought him to his new home, Stasis. Throughout this incident, the G-Man had teleported all across Black Mesa to ensure that specific actions occurred at the right time and that there was no deviation from the plan. Nevertheless, he still had two loose ends to tie up after the destruction of Black Mesa. He told the corporal that he admired his ability to adapt and survive against all odds. His employers, on the other hand, did not trust that Adrian would keep everything he had seen to himself, one of those human temptations they had observed. So, the G-Man had offered them an alternative, to preserve Adrian in stasis as an agent for a mission in the future. There, he could be stored safely so that he could cause no harm and no harm could come to him. A choice that had been made for Adrian. In doing so, the G-Man had hired a new recruit against his will, whose services could be sold off. With Adrian dealt with, the G-Man had one more loose end: Freeman. Over in Zen, the Nylanth understood what had happened and how its loss of control over Zen had been manufactured by something that was not a man. The creature also knew that this entity waited for Gordon. Regardless, the Nylanth put up a fight against the scientist, but it was not enough. The death of the Nylanth triggered many events. Gordon was pulled from danger by the G-Man. The entity removed Gordon's weapons as he claimed they were government property. He told Freeman that because of his actions, the border world of Zen was under his and his employer's control. The plan had worked and they had got what they wanted. His employers were also impressed by Gordon Freeman's actions during this incident and wanted to offer him a job. The specifications of this job were not explained, and Gordon actually did not have a choice. He either stepped into a portal created by the G-Man, or he was offered a battle he had no chance of winning. Gordon would be an incredibly valuable asset in the future. With this Hobson's choice, Gordon entered the portal, and he too, just like Adrian, was stored in stasis for future use. For the most part, the taking of Zen was successful. Not only had the G-Man and his employers acquired access to a border world with connections to so many worlds, but they had also hired two strong assets, Dr. Gordon Freeman and Corporal Adrian Shepard. The Black Mesa incident was a perfectly orchestrated moment in human history. But for the G-Man, it was a worthy sacrifice for the control of Zen. But why did he send Gordon to fight while having control over space and time? Well, the Nylanth and the Vortigaunt had control over an energy source called the Vortessence. The Vortigaunt, as slaves of the Nylanth, were able to use the power to limit or even completely remove his abilities. On one occasion in the future, this green energy was used to hold the G-Man in place without access to any of his powers. So it made sense why they sent Freeman. It appeared that the G-Man and his employers had done everything in their power to limit the aftermath and even the knowledge of this incident, which begs the question, was the arrival of the Combine on Earth an unforeseen consequence of the acquisition of Zen? The Resonance Cascade had alerted the Combine Empire of the existence of planet Earth. Just as they had done to so many other planets, they attacked and conquered it with their vast army. Over the next 20 years, humanity was subjected to some of the worst treatment imaginable as the Combine harvested what they needed from the planets. As for the G-Man and his employers over this period, their actions are unknown. Why they wanted Zen and for what reason has never been revealed. However, after 2 decades away from his planet, the employers had a new task for Gordon. As stated, the placement of Gordon could have been something the employers wanted to happen, or his services could have been paid for in a contract. Regardless, the G-Man entered stasis to put Gordon Freeman in place for a new mission.
Rise and shine, Mr. Freeman. Rise and shine. Not that I wish to imply you have been sleeping on the job. No one is more deserving of a rest, and all the effort in the world would have gone to waste until... well, let's just say your hour has come again. The right man in the wrong place can make all the difference in the world. So wake up, Mr. Freeman. Wake up and smell the ashes.
Having placed Gordon on a train 20 years after the Black Mesa incident, once again, he watched from the sidelines to make sure his soldier followed the correct path. The Combine's occupation of Earth was likely an unintended side effect of their acquisition of Zen, and at this moment in human history, the Resistance had grown just enough to finally fight back against the Combine. Gordon would be the match to trigger the powder keg that was an uprising. As he had done with the Black Mesa incident, the G-Man watched Gordon from afar and monitored his progress. From the City 17 train station to a fallen Resistance base to a Breencast screen, the G-Man observed Gordon as he caught the attention of the Combine, traversed the Underground Railroad. The entity intervened at New Little Odessa, very likely to alert Colonel Odessa Cubbage of a Combine raid on the way so that Gordon would be prepared for the assault. He observed as Freeman survived the raid of Black Mesa East and helped in the fall of Nova Prospekt. As Gordon and an adult Alex had been inside during the explosion, and as they were not heard from for weeks after, Gordon, the hero of Black Mesa, became a martyr, the symbol of this revolution, the spark that the Resistance truly needed to trigger an uprising. Alex had also been a very valuable companion to Gordon and member of the Resistance. It appeared that the G-Man's interference in her fate had ultimately helped this mission. Yet, Gordon and Alex had not fallen with Nova Prospekt. They had instead entered a slow time warp after attempting to use the unstable teleporter in the prison. They arrived in Dr. Kleiner's lab 2 weeks later, just in time to see how the Resistance had finally decided to fight back against their oppressors. Shortly after, with Gordon on track, the G-Man watched as he arrived at the top of the Citadel. His actions here led to the destabilization of the dark fusion reactor that powered the Citadel, an action that led Dr. Wallace Breen to fall to his death, and the Combine to lose contact with Earth. Every Citadel across the planet shut down because of this. This may have been what the G-Man and his employers had brought Gordon here to do. Having completed his mission, the entity paused time just as an explosion threatened to take Gordon and Alex's life.
Time, Dr. Freeman? Is it really that time again? It seems as if you only just arrived. You've done a great deal in a small time span. You've done so well, in fact, that I've received some interesting offers for your services. Ordinarily, I wouldn't contemplate them, but these are extraordinary times. Rather than offer you the illusion of free choice, I will take the liberty of choosing for you, if and when your time comes round again. I do apologize for what must seem to you an arbitrary imposition, Dr. Freeman. I trust it will all make sense to you in the course of... well, I'm really not at liberty to say. In the meantime, this is where I get off.
What was interesting about this moment, other than the fact that the G-Man had placed Gordon back in stasis after the mission to remove the Combine's access to Earth had been successful, was that he did not save Alex this time. He had left her to her fate. It appears that she had served her purpose. As for the employment offers, it solidified that while Gordon believed he was in full control, he was not. He was simply a pawn of the G-Man. He had been pulled out of stasis to cripple the Combine's hold of Earth, and having done it, he was put back in storage. This is where the story of the G-Man and his employers becomes more interesting. Up until this point, they had maintained complete control over their assets and a clear plan of the timeline. They did not foresee the intrusion of the Vortigaunt. This species had an incredibly strong connection to the Vortessence, the power that appeared to be one of the few weaknesses of the G-Man. The Vortigaunt were also aware of him, or what he was. In their alliance with humanity against the Combine, they had formed a strong connection with the population of Earth, but they did not reveal all of their knowledge. The Vortigaunt saw Alex and Gordon as important members of their fight against the Combine. They also had the ability to peer into the future through the Vortessence. When the Vortigaunt saw how the G-Man had once again abducted Gordon and left Alex to a fate of certain death, they enhanced their power with antlion extract and then froze time themselves to save her. They also entered stasis, the G-Man's prison outside of space-time that he had stored his recruits. With guards stationed at the entrance, two of the Vort tracked down Gordon. In fear that his best asset could be stolen, the G-Man entered stasis.
We'll see about that.
This intrusion showed that the G-Man not only had a weakness, but he also felt anger, a human emotion. Something of his had been stolen and released into the timeline, someone that should not have been there. It is also unclear on whether Alex's survival was foreseen by the G-Man. The release of Gordon meant that his actions would ultimately change or adapt whatever plan this shadowy organization had. The G-Man could also not contact or manipulate Gordon as the Vortigaunt watched over him. This was a huge problem. Over the following days, the Citadel collapsed, leveled City 17, and Alex and Gordon escaped on a train. However, on their way to a secret resistance base outside of the city, Alex was attacked by a Combine hunter who sought them out. Alex and Gordon had stolen some valuable information from the Combine before its collapse, and they wanted it back. As the Vortigaunt came together to save Alex, someone they believed to be incredibly important to a moment in the future, the G-Man appeared to Gordon in this rare, distracted moment.
Dr. Freeman, I realize this moment may not be the most convenient for a heart-to-heart, but I had to wait until your friends were otherwise occupied. There was a time they cared nothing for Miss Vance, when their only experience of humanity was a crowbar coming at them down a steel corridor. When I plucked her from Black Mesa, I acted in the face of objections that she was a mere child and of no practical use to anyone. I have learned to ignore such naysayers when quelling them was out of the question. Still, I am not one to squander my investments, and I remain confident she was worth far more than the initial appraisal. That's why I must now extract from you some small repayment owed for your own survival. See her safely to White Forest, Dr. Freeman. I wish I could do more than keep an eye on you, but I have agreed to abide by certain restrictions. Well, now, listen carefully, my dear. When you see your father, relay these words. Prepare for unforeseen consequences.
Having said his piece, he retreated back and began to watch again from a distance. Freeman and Alex made their way towards White Forest, and on their way out of Victory Mine, the G-Man made his first stop at the highway outpost to make sure they were on track. This was not a part of the plan, but he and his employers had to work with the situation they had. Alex was in possession of a data file that displayed the rough location of a missing research vessel, the Borealis. It had disappeared from its home deep underground in Aperture Science. This vessel had advanced technology on board, and when the Resistance discovered where it was, this would change everything. The warning to prepare for unforeseen consequences directed at Eli specifically was a very calculated move by the G-Man. He knew that Eli regretted his decision not to shut down the anti-mass spectrometer during the Black Mesa incident after he had heard these words once before. He knew that Eli might link this warning to the discovery of the Borealis. It would appear that the G-Man and his employers did not want the Resistance to seek this ship out. At least that is my interpretation. As expected, upon the arrival of Alex and Gordon at White Forest, they learned of the Borealis stuck somewhere in the north, and Alex blurted out the G-Man's message as if he had commanded her to in this moment, as the G-Man's face briefly appeared on the monitor. As expected, Eli had the reaction the G-Man wanted. As he watched, the Resistance fought off the Combine, and they even launched a rocket at a forming super portal. In doing this, the Combine was completely cut off from the planet. No backup plan. In a final moment of desperation, two Combine advisors crashed through into the hangar of a helicopter that Alex and Gordon planned to use to rescue one of their fellow Resistance members. In this moment, Eli was brutally murdered by an advisor, and all of his memories and thoughts were absorbed by the creature before he was dropped to the ground. Murdered brutally in front of his daughter. The G-Man watched this. None of this was meant to happen. Gordon's return had ultimately led to this. Alex would not have retrieved the information in the Citadel, and Eli would still be alive. From the G-Man's perspective, the interference of the Vortigaunt had led Gordon to be unable or unwilling to perform the tasks laid before him. As a result, actions had occurred that were unplanned. So, the G-Man and his employers looked for someone new to help them. In order to rewrite moments that had not gone to plan, the G-Man used his power and travelled back 5 years in this timeline. He foresaw how events would play out and knew how to test and hire a new recruit, a younger Alex Vance. Just as he had with the Zen incident, the G-Man prepared a series of events to see what Alex could do. He allowed the Combine to briefly discover his location. As quickly as they could, they used Vortessen's energy to trap him inside of a prison. During a raid on a Combine facility, Dr. Eli Vance and his friend Russell entered a Combine system and discovered information about something called the Vault. But the system provided very limited details on what it actually was. As planned, Eli was captured by Combine forces, and the discovery of a Combine prison led Alex to enter the Vault under the impression that Gordon Freeman, the hero of Black Mesa who had gone missing, was stored inside it. It was not until Alex freed the entity that she realized he was not Gordon Freeman. He was something else.
Impressive work, Ms. Vance.
Gordon Freeman?
Gordon Freeman. Ms. Vance, you wouldn't need all that to imprison Gordon Freeman.
So, who are you?
Perhaps what I am is not as important as what I can offer you in exchange for coming all this way. Some believe the fate of our worlds is inflexible. My employers disagree. They authorize me to nudge things in a particular direction from time to time. What would you want nudged, Miss Vance?
The Combine off Earth. I want the Combine off Earth.
That would be a considerably large nudge. Too large, given the interests of my employers.
Well, you asked.
What if I could offer you something you don't know you want?
Dad? What? Is that me? What is this? What's happening?
We are in the future. This is the moment where you watch your father die. Unless...
What? Unless what?
Unless you were to take matters into your own hands. Release your father, Miss Vance. as a consequence of your action, this entity will continue, and this entity will not.
Right. So he's okay, right? He lives. My dad lives.
You are aware that you've proven yourself to be of extraordinary value. A previous hire has been unable or unwilling to perform the tasks laid before him. We have struggled to find a suitable replacement until now.
No! I just want to go home. Send me home!
I'm afraid you misunderstand the situation, Miss Vance.
Wait! Hey, wait! Wait! Wait!
In allowing Alex to reach through space and time to kill the advisor, the G-Man had quite possibly fixed an issue created by the Vortigaunt, the death of Eli. However, Alex had once again been plucked by the G-Man, this time as a new agent after Gordon Freeman had failed him. 5 years in the future, just after Alex had been taken, Dr. Eli Vance knew exactly where his daughter had gone. He knew that the G-Man and his unforeseen consequences must have had something to do with her disappearance. Eli, Gordon, and Alex were just 3 of the G-Man's pawns, a mutual friend or enemy of sorts who had ruined their lives. The G-Man had a relationship of sorts with many people. Eli knew him to be the harbinger of disaster. Breen knew him as the person who controlled Gordon. Alex knew him as the entity that had stopped the death of her father. The Combine also knew of him in some way, and that Vortessen's energy could stop him. And the Vortigaunt also knew of him and what he could do. Other pawns included Adrian, who still remains in stasis to this day. Even Barney Calhoun was watched by the shadowy group at some point. Every aspect of the Half-Life timeline was manipulated by the G-Man and his employers for whatever goal they required. The Zen invasion triggered so much, and the placement of Gordon 20 years later allowed them to hit the Combine hard. But the interference of the Vortigaunt simply got in the way. I have done my best to pull together what I could about the G-Man and his employers, but without Half-Life 2 Episode 3 or Half-Life 3, we will sadly probably never know what they actually are or what their aim is. There are, however, several fan theories that are very interesting. The theory that the G-Man is a future Gordon Freeman is one that has floated around. G for Gordon and man at the end of Freeman. A future self guiding a younger self to make sure that something happens. Not one I buy into really. I think the most straightforward theory is that the G-Man is still a messenger of his employers, but his employers are Valve. The G-Man set up everything for the game's events to occur. When Valve struggled to create a Half-Life 2 Episode 3 that they felt would not match the hype, they made Half-Life Alyx and had the G-Man retcon one of the most impactful moments in gaming history. They rewrote the death of Eli Vance in-game, which allowed them to set up a new storyline or timeline for another game. The all-seeing Vortigaunt claimed that far distant eyes looked out through Gordon's, and that something secret steered them both, but they would not name it. We are the viewers through his eyes. The G-Man, as the employee of Valve, set up the entire series for us to play through. What I can't figure out though is who the Vortigaunt would be in this theory. What do you think? The most interesting theory is that the G-Man is a Shu Ulathoi, the original name of the Combine advisor. The Breen Grub Twitter account written by Mark Laidlaw is considered not canon, but I would personally like to believe that there is some truth to it. that. While there are a lot to the tweets, which I have covered in a previous video, it tells the story of the Shu Ulathoi, a species of dreamers who created whole worlds inside their shared telepathic mind. These were the Shu Ulathoi in their grub stage. When they hatched, they were cut off from their worlds and transformed into whatever they wished by thought. These Shu Ulathoi were also a species conquered by the Combine, and their grubs were harvested to create the Combine advisors. However, some of these grubs managed to escape during the invasion. The theory is that the G-Man and his employers are what these grubs turned into when they hatched, a creature with possibly psychic power that looks like a human, but something is just off. During her altercation with the G-Man, Alex had asked who he was, and he responded with what instead. The G-Man mentions human temptations when he speaks to Adrian at the end of Opposing Force, something a non-human would say. He also said to Adrian that the Marine's ability to adapt and survive against all odds was something that reminded him of himself, something a member of a species who had survived the fall of their world would maybe say. Desperate to fight back against the Combine, who had conquered their planet, murdered their young, and created nurseries to imprint the minds of their most important members into new artificial grubs to live as one of them, the Shu Ulathoi story is fascinating, and while I could talk about it forever in this video, I would once again suggest my previous video on it. This is my favorite theory, that the G-Man was just another victim of the Combine. In this video, we explore the lore and story behind Bill in Left 4 Dead. Now, where do we begin the story of William Overbeck? Well, he appeared to be around 60 years old in 2009 during the green flu epidemic, so we can estimate that he was likely born between 1945 and 1948. Bill was always strong-willed and tenacious, and when he was old enough too, he enlisted in the US Army and joined the 1st Special Forces Group, where he underwent intense Green Beret training. Bill believed that bravery did not mean a lack of fear. It meant that you could be scared as hell but still pick up a weapon and fight anyway, and this showed through his military career. Bill's time in the military was the best of his life. He served at least 2 tours, during which he was deployed to Vietnam. In 1968, he fought in the bloodiest battle of the war, the Battle of Hue. Overbeck saw the worst Vietnam had to offer, and still lived to tell the tale. Unfortunately, his time in the army eventually came to an end, but not by his own choice. He was injured in the line of duty when shrapnel tore through his knee, a permanent injury that led to an honorable discharge. Although he left the army with a handful of medals and valor, he missed the fight. As the decades passed, Bill drifted aimlessly from dead-end job to dead-end job. Over time, as he entered his 60s, he had grown distant from his family and any close relationships. His days in the military had been the best years of his life, and with that purpose ripped away from him, he just wanted to find a new one. Bill had never liked hospitals, but as a man in his 60s, he had to visit them more often than most. For his service to his country, he had been granted access to a veterans hospital where he could receive treatment for any medical issues. On one day in late September of 2009, he attended an appointment for a scheduled surgery. As of now, it remains unknown what this surgery was for, but it was most likely related to his injured knee. The day before, the Civil Defense Emergency Agency had detected a new virus outbreak in the city of Fairfield, Pennsylvania. Patient Zero had exhibited extreme hostility, and to combat and reduce the spread of a potential contagion, authorities issued signs and documentation instructing the public to wash their hands, report anyone displaying symptoms, and to remain indoors if they felt unwell.
Information about this green flu was extremely limited in those first few hours, and because of this, life continued as normal. As Bill prepared for his surgery, he sat alone, without friends or family, and lit a cigarette. He had no interest in small talk, nor did he care for the hospital staff who attempted to stop him from smoking. In the operating theatre, Bill was given anesthesia and instructed to count down from 10 as his body drifted into unconsciousness. However, as he reached 7, he watched in a hazy daze as one of the doctors suddenly attacked the others above him. As blood poured everywhere and stuck in a state between consciousness and unconsciousness, Bill fought hard against his body's natural instinct to shut down. He willed himself to move, to stand up and escape the bloodshed. With everything he had left, Bill kicked the doctor as hard as he could, then forced himself to his feet, determined to find something sharp to defend himself. The green flu had mutated. Within moments, those infected had transformed into aggressive, bloodthirsty zombies. Fighting his body's sluggishness and the pain radiating through him, Bill grabbed a bone saw and cut down every hostile in his path towards the exit of the Veterans Hospital. As Bill Overbeck burst through the emergency entrance into the streets, he saw the full, awful magnitude of what had happened to his city. Zombies flooded the streets, hungry and relentless, and they all wanted him. As rain poured down, the streets ran red with blood as Bill sliced his way through the chaos until he finally reached his apartment above a deli shop. The past decades had been difficult for Overbeck. He missed the war, but in a cruel twist of fate, a new war had found him. One that threatened the future of humanity. And as he stood in his apartment, soaking wet, his mind drifted back to his golden years of service. As he stared down at an old photograph of himself, he retrieved his military fatigues, his old green beret, and put them on. Fully prepared to take the fight to the streets, Bill picked up his favorite assault rifle, an M16A2, and got to work. Although old, he knew how to defend himself. As the days passed, Cedar issued guidance on how to survive against the infected as they learned more about the virus. Safe rooms were established, stocked with weapons, ammunition, food, and first aid. But each day, the virus changed. It mutated, evolved. Contamination services were set up, but as the green flu spread further out across Pennsylvania, many safe zones were either abandoned or overrun by the infected. The walls of safe rooms soon became filled with eulogies for the lost, letters to friends and family who had been separated, and desperate messages listing new local safe zones and evacuation centers. Fairfield Arena, Borden High School, and Riverside First Church were all designated as safe havens, but reaching them was another matter entirely. The military barricaded buildings and sealed off streets in a desperate attempt to contain the hordes, but these actions came at a cost. Survivors were sealed inside, and their escape routes were cut off. For someone like Bill, he saw this as a challenge. As the survivors fought through the streets to find safety, some found that although they had been bitten or scratched by the infected, they remained unchanged. They carried the virus, but it did not transform them. Bill was one of those lucky enough to be immune. In this hot zone of the zombie infestation, it was almost impossible not to contract the green flu, so it became clear every survivor Bill encountered was also immune to its effects. They did not have to worry about becoming one of the undead, they just worried about what the undead would do to them. Each day introduced new challenges and dangers, and one of these came in the form of an especially threatening mutation: the wailing cries of a woman. Yet, she was not a survivor. She was a sure death to anyone who disturbed her sorrows, a witch with talents. Luckily for Bill, he survived his first encounter with one of these and would warn any he met of the dangers. By the time 2 weeks had passed since Patient Zero contracted the virus, Bill had met up and stayed with 3 other capable survivors, a junior systems analyst called Lewis, college student Zoe, and Francis. Each one of them was handy with a weapon and smart enough to have survived this long in a zombie-infested Pennsylvania. As a team, they fought together to find an evacuation zone, and on their journey, as they traveled through the alleys of Fairfield, Bill noticed something interesting: a thick green bile. This was just another mutation in the green flu, and it could only mean something bad. However, during this moment, they also heard the cries of a witch. As Bill had already encountered one of these before, he knew what to do: to be quiet and not startle her. Unfortunately, his warnings did not go to plan, and not only did the witch attack, but a horde of zombies swarmed the alley too. As a great team, the 4 survivors just about fought back against the infected and reached safety on a rooftop. It was here that they saw the lights of Mercy Hospital, and at the top, an evacuation zone. Crossing the street had almost killed them. Crossing the city would take so much more. With each minute that passed, Fairfield became more dangerous. On their treacherous journey towards the hospital, 4 people who would never have gotten along or met in a regular situation fought perfectly side by side as they defended each other through the streets and sewers. Bill had done well to survive on his own, but he had met them through his natural tenacity and strong will. He knew he was old. Francis reminded him of that frequently, but with his army training and authoritative demeanor, he became the unofficial leader of this group of survivors. When Lewis or Francis were injured or fell down, he spoke to them like they were soldiers in his unit as he patched them up. They had to get back on their feet and fight. If their mouths could still work, they could still fire a gun. Yet with Zoe, he showed more of a caring side. Zoe had lost her father to the infection. Well, she had shot him before he could turn, and while Bill never spoke of family, of a daughter or granddaughter, with the way he spoke to Zoe and appeared to genuinely care about her, it was clear he saw her in that way, someone to protect. They rested in safe rooms, observed the notes of the lost on the walls, restocked, and continued to fight their way through the city. Lewis showed Bill how to make a pipe bomb. The veteran preferred grenades and Molotovs, but the pipe bombs did come in useful. Even in this apocalypse, the team kept things light. Bill and Francis clashed frequently. The old warrior claimed that a few years of service would have not only slimmed down the young idiot, but also taught him how to shut up. Yet on the other hand, he joked with Zoe about the great zombie attack of 1957, something he later had to explain was a joke. Upon their eventual arrival at the rooftop of Mercy Hospital, they once again fought in harmony against not only regular infected, but also the mutated tanks, smokers, boomers, and hunters, until finally a rescue helicopter arrived. A volunteer who piloted News Chopper 5. It appeared that everything was going to be okay. They had been rescued and were on their way to an actual safe zone, but as they flew towards Riverside, the pilot turned and Zoe had to put him down. This resulted in a crash. Unknown to them, the pilot had either been infected before he had picked them up, or as carriers, they had unintentionally returned his generosity with transmission. Bill, Lewis, Zoe, and Francis knew that they were immune, but they did not realize what they had done, and having survived a helicopter crash, they continued on foot through Whitney County to find another evacuation spot. On their journey, they kept their spirits up. Bill and Francis continued to bicker, the veteran worried about whether this immunity to the virus was a lifetime guarantee or something that would disappear in the next mutation. As an older man, he worried about whether a potential future common cold could be the early stages of zombieism. Even in his slight worry, he was still happy to talk to Lewis, watch out for Zoe, and correct Francis. On one occasion, Francis called the zombies vampires. This really irritated Bill. Unfortunately, they found themselves in a constant cycle. Before they reached each safe zone, they had been overrun by zombies or abandoned by the military. In Riverside, they managed to get a waterfront rescue from John and Amanda Slater on the St. Lydia fishing vessel in return for protection, but they were kicked off the boat and left for dead after the husband and wife grew aggressive. In the bombed-out city of Newburgh, they managed to secure a plane, but it was shot down. Yet finally, after a dangerous trek through the Allegheny National Forest, they discovered Doherty Farm, labeled as Evacuation Outpost Echo. Bill wondered who would have been stationed at this place. He thought it would probably be the chicken shit National Guard. While empty, the survivors did hear an emergency radio broadcast from the US military. This appeared to be it, their freedom from this nightmare, and as they requested transport and waited for the army to pick them up, they defended the farmhouse against the new locals. As the rescue armored personnel carrier arrived outside of the farmhouse, Bill found himself swarmed by zombies upstairs. Yet, although Francis could have gone up to help him, he had learned two main things about the veteran since they had met. Bill did not like it when someone made fun of his old guy goat beard, and he was never to be interrupted when working. After the destruction of a tank, Bill ran with the rest of the other 3 survivors and entered the vehicle to safety. Inside, Bill listened as Lewis and Francis argued about whether they were finally safe. The helicopter had crashed, they had been kicked off the boat, and their plane had crashed. Would this rescue be any different? This small group had grown on Bill. They had saved him, and he had saved them on many occasions. They were his to protect, his own little family, and as they bickered, he thought about the future and what it could mean. If Zoe was safe, then he was happy. As expected by Lewis, the cycle began again. Rescue 9 was ordered to bypass Safe Zone Echo and return to the Millhaven military base. When they arrived, the survivors were separated and brought in for testing. This base had studied the virus and believed carriers to be as much of an issue as the infected. They unintentionally spread the green flu everywhere they went and left only chaos in their wake. They also knew how volatile the mutations were. Sometimes it spread through the air, other times through blood and scratches. Yet, they did not know of the other mutated zombies out there beyond their walls. They had set themselves up in a bubble after they had lost contact with Cedar and the rest of the military. They did not know of the Boomer, the Witch, Smoker, Hunter, or Tank. In the examination room, Bill watched as a gas-masked soldier and a face-masked doctor asked Zoe for her spit. This was clearly a tense situation for the doctor and soldier. They were terrified of catching the virus from them. Zoe told the doctor that she was immune and that they were safe to be around, but this only pushed the soldier to become more aggressive to keep the staff here safe. Bill did not like the way they spoke to Zoe, and when he got the chance, he distracted the soldier, and with the opportunity, Zoe grabbed their gun and knocked them down. It was here that the doctor explained what a carrier was. Bill and Zoe were immune, but they still carried the virus. They realized that they were not safe to be around after all, and their arrival at Millhaven was not to be rescued. It was to be studied to find a cure, and then put down. There were only two futures for humanity, one in which every infected and carrier was wiped out, or one where those who had the carrier gene lived on and passed it on, a gene that ran in the father's side. When Zoe realized that her father would never have turned, she broke down. She had shot him because he did not want to become a zombie. He did not have to die. In this vulnerable moment, Bill comforted her. After a disagreement with how to deal with the infected and protect the soldiers stationed at Millhaven, Lieutenant Mora sounded an alarm to evacuate the base. However, this alarm triggered the local hordes, and just like it had happened before, the base was swarmed and overwhelmed. Having dealt with a very similar situation before, Bill, Zoe, Lewis, and Francis reunited and planned to escape on a southbound train. Bill had a plan, a way to stop the cycle. They just had to get to the train first. In this chaos, several soldiers joined the survivors, and as the leader of the group, Bill told them that they were a quarter of a mile away from the train. If the new meat fell behind, they would be left behind, and as they raced towards their exit from Millhaven, they were swarmed by the infected, Lieutenant Mora, and a tank. One by one, the four survivors made it to the train, and as they departed, Zoe begged Bill to stop it to allow the other soldiers on board, but he meant what he had said. The new meat had fallen behind. All that mattered to him was his team. Lewis, Francis, and most importantly, Zoe. The outsiders had died so that Bill could make sure his own lived. That was all that mattered. Zoe was so confused by this. She thought she knew Bill, but she had not seen this side of him before. Bill was a stubborn old man, but his priorities were the safety of his group. And finally, with a moment of peace, he explained his plan for their future. When the train reached Rayford in Georgia, they were to find a sailboat to sail to the Florida Keys. There, they would have several islands without zombies, and there would be no people to infect. It was perfect. It was close enough to get to, and miles off of the mainland. Good weather, no army, no jails, and no more zombies. Zoe, however, struggled with this. Bill had left the soldiers to die, and if they went to the Florida Keys, they would just be leaving other people to die. What if they went out and looked for other carriers and told them what they were? Maybe they could help people. But in Bill's experience, not everyone can be saved. The rest of the train journey gave Zoe time to think about what Bill had said, and maybe he was right. Not everyone could be saved, and if they were in the Keys, other people would be safe from her. By the time the survivors arrived in Rayford and got off the train, they found that the Echo Base had also fallen, but their new plan did not depend on it. Under Bill's instructions, they needed to find a sailboat. As Zoe dealt with her mixed feelings towards Bill, of how she was furious he had allowed the soldiers to die, she knew he was right. Bill and Lewis spoke about what they could do on the island. Bill could teach Lewis to fish, and they should find a house on a point to get a good view of passing ships. Zoe loved Bill, even in this short time with him, and with her new family, she helped in the search. Lewis found a yacht, but was injured when he discovered that all of the occupants below had mutated into witches. Bill had said he only wanted a sailboat. A sailboat they found shortly after that was fully stockpiled with food and medical supplies. There was more than enough to get them to the Keys. The only issue was that to leave the mainland, they had to raise a bridge. With everything these four survivors had learned over the past 3 weeks, they knew that noise attracted the horde, and the generator to raise the bridge would be extremely loud. In their preparation for what they believed to be their final fight, Zoe and Bill went to the generator as Lewis and Francis defended the bridge from strays. In this time alone, Bill attempted to clear the air, but Zoe had already moved on. The boat was the plan, she was ready, and they just had to get this done. As soon as the generator activated, their worst fear became a reality. Hordes of zombies flooded from everywhere. Tanks, boomers, every infected came to the bridge, and as the four of them shot them down as the bridge raised, they hoped this was it. But nothing was ever simple. The generator gave out. The survivors fought back the hordes as much as they could, but when they began to run low on ammo, stuck on a bridge that would not move, they accepted that this could be the end. But not Bill. He saw the 3 tanks on the way and, with a Molotov, ordered his family to cover him as he jumped back onto land towards the generator. Every time he thought he was done, every time he thought she was safe, every time they came like a bad nightmare, Bill had had enough. The veteran set a tank on fire and pulled the others in his direction, away from the bridge. With the press of a switch, he reactivated the generator and looked back at the bridge as it began to rise again. But he also realized just how far away it was. He thought maybe if he could just make it back. But before he could finish that thought, he was punched and knocked back by a tank. Veteran William Overbeck knew it was over, and as he watched 3 tanks walk towards him, he lit his final cigarette and thought about Lewis, Francis, and Zoe. Because of him, they were safe. That was all he had wanted. He would have sacrificed 100 people to keep them safe. He had sacrificed himself, and it was worth it. Here, we explore the lore and story behind Stroggification. Out in the vast universe, the Strogg Empire explored space in search of biological life. This cybernetic species came from a barren, wasteland planet called Strogos, a world mined of its resources and wildlife corrupted by the fumes of the many factories that filled the surface. The Strogg were a species of war. It was all they had ever known, and due to their exploration of the many fields of science, they had discovered spaceflight, teleportation technology, and most importantly, how to manipulate their own biological structures in order to become stronger. This was not a species that anyone else in the universe would want to encounter. They had just one goal: to fuel their war machine with new organic material. The Strogg were led by their supreme leader, dubbed the PATRON. Their technology predominantly focused on biological research and technology, and in their goal to conquer and use all biological life for their advancement, the PATRON's orders were relayed through a central nexus, and these orders could not be disobeyed. From this nexus, each Strogg was connected to the Strogg hive mind, and thus, they were given information about the rest of the armies, technology, and languages. This made the Strogg a devastating foe to encounter. On Earth in 2065, the Strogg first encountered humanity. At first, during this invasion, humanity believed that the Strogg had come to their planet for their natural resources. However, it soon became apparent that these alien invaders had actually come for them. This was the start of the conflict between Earth and Strogos that would last for many years, a conflict that would cost countless lives on both sides. In the first conflict, the Strogg wiped out millions of human lives with their advanced technologies, and with them, they took many prisoners to Strogos. Although in a weakened state, Earth chose to retaliate and attack Strogos in order to remove the possibility of a future invasion. This attack did not go as planned, and once again, the Strogg captured more prisoners. These wars themselves were interesting, yet the horror of this story lies in what happened to those captured by the Strogg.
The Strog scientists had developed an inhumane, disgusting, abhorrent procedure to make use of every biological organism they encountered, and every part was used. Only those unfortunate enough to be captured by this brutal species would truly understand the horrors of the Strog Empire. The Strog were not a typical species. Every member of the species was a soldier in some form in the many wars they began. Despite this, they did not reproduce in the typical way. They made use of the biological components of their victims, and as the Space Marine Corps of planet Earth arrived at Strogos to wipe out the Strog, they gathered an understanding of what happened to the humans that had been taken. They had become Strog. While humanity buried their dead, the Strog instead recycled the bodies of their victims to improve themselves regardless of the species. Their factories relied on some sort of biological components to run. Human torsos and heads lined the walls, each one powered or helped run some sort of Strog structure. It was pure horror. These humans had not been deemed worthy of the Stroggification procedure or had failed it, and so their parts had been recycled. Nothing went to waste. As the war continued, the Space Marine Corps were made aware of Stroggification. It was described as a brutal, surgical procedure. The limbs and flesh of the fallen were fused with metal and machinery to create the monstrosities that were the alien Strog. Although these units were told of the consequences of their capture, they would not know just how extreme this procedure was until they actually experienced it, but the risk was worth it in order to save the humans back home from another invasion from the Strog. Upon their capture by the Strog, a human prisoner was relocated to a Strog factory, stripped into their underwear, scanned and restrained within a containment unit. This was the beginning of the Stroggification procedure, and each step would be more atrocious than the last. On this conveyor belt of chaos, the human captives had become objects on an assembly line for the Strog scientists to perform each step of the Stroggification process. The worst part about this was that as each prisoner looked ahead, held in place, they saw what was about to happen to them as the person before them was subjected to terror. The Strog needed their captives to survive this whole procedure. So the first step was to inject steroids and a nanite colony into the cardiopulmonary system. In essence, this boosted the heart and lungs' natural ability to withstand what was to come. This injection also came in the form of a large needle, and without any pain relief, the victims felt every ounce of agony. If required, the scientists on this section would even fly over to the convert and manually begin the process of facial mutilation. Having completed this step, the conveyor belt continued on, and as the prisoner lay there, trapped on their way to the next step, all they could see was the splatter of blood on the walls and roof. They were not the first, and surely they would not be the last to be in this situation. The Strog required resilient warriors to fight for them. The humans they had fought against did have a strong combat ability, but their flesh was weak and frail. To enhance them, the prisoners were subjected to a well-used saw blade and their legs were removed, just like a blade sawed through wood. It was often that the convert passed out at this point. However, the steroids kept them alive as their hearts beat faster and faster. In their place, new robotic legs were jammed into and fused with the raw leg stumps. As for the rest of the human body, protective metal plates were installed directly into the prisoner's flesh. Once almost naked, their lower face, chest, arms, hands, and abdomen were now sheltered from any harm. Although this augmentation of course would have been extremely painful, the Strogg in a way had improved the human. They were faster, stronger, and bulletproof to a degree. The human convert was almost complete at this point, and while the physical modifications were done, their minds were not. On the next step in this terror tour, the prisoners were subjected to a large hypodermic needle. Upon impact into the brain, specifically the cerebellum, a neurosite was implanted. The cerebellum was responsible for most of the responsibilities of the human body. The neurosite was designed to almost take over this section of the brain, and as a result, the entire human body. This device was also connected to the Nexus, the heart of the Strogg, and with this connection, the prisoner was flooded with information and given access to Strogg-only privileges. They instantly learned their language, had access to their technology, and healing equipment, to name just a few. Having been subjected to the physical modifications and had the neurosite implanted, this new Strogg was placed into a tank and prepared for activation. Just like a new device that required activation before use. When needed, their tank was pulled and sent to the registration center. It should be noted that at this point, this Strogg still had the human thoughts, desires, and hopes of escape. However, as soon as they were registered by the laser, the neurosite was activated, and the Nexus's direct connection took them over. All of their basic drives, dreams, and feelings overtaken through their neurosites. The Nexus now controlled this unit, and they followed the orders of the Macron. Simply drones in a machine army. The Stroggification process was essential in the creation of new units in the Strogg army. The process itself was not perfect, sometimes it failed, yet this was not a huge issue for the Strogg. Everything could be recycled. Some of the humans were claimed by Strogg scientists to experiment on in order to improve their war machine. These experiments were often dubbed mortality tests, and they were as awful as the name sounds. The victims were subjected to inhumane, awful treatment. Their organs were removed without pain relief in order to simply study the reaction of the victim, how much pain it could tolerate, and how long they could live without their organs. This was why torsos and heads lined the walls and were connected to machinery in Strogg factories. For the biological parts that were deemed unused by the Strogg, they were instead recycled into a biofuel called Stroyant. The Strogg were created in bulk, but they too needed something to sustain them, heal them, run the biological components of Strogg machinery, and the various other needs across Stroggos. To recycle these biological materials, many Stroyant factories were set up across Stroggos. Makeshift factories were also set up on the world that the Strogg had assaulted. These factories were just as awful as those constructed for the Stroggification process. Just like a meat factory, body parts were dropped onto conveyor belts to begin the Stroyantification process. Sometimes, even the victims of the mortality tests were dropped onto these belts, tortured into insanity, unaware or simply incapable of helping themselves from what was to come. As this biological matter, alive or dead, continued on through this line, they were chopped up into smaller, manageable pieces. These remains were then collected and treated with chemicals to refine it into Stroyant. On Stroggos, it was noted that raw Stroyant was fed to a large creature dubbed the Stroyant Processing Creature. Having been force-fed this substance, a reaction occurred as the Stroyant traveled through the creature's stomach and digestive system, and it was converted into ready-to-use Stroyant. Whether a similar process occurred on Earth or the other Conquer planets is unknown. Nothing went to waste. A human captive was either transformed into a Strogg, experimented on to turn them into a new type of Strogg, or they became Stroyant. Here, we explore in the lore and story behind the personality cores of the Aperture Science Facility. As Aperture completed the development of one of their most ambitious projects, the genetic lifeform and disk operating system, they activated her for the first time, but she did not respond in the way the technicians expected her to. GLaDOS had been designed and constructed to run Aperture and accelerate the projects in development. She was also the first known sentient robot that came from the upload of a human consciousness. She had once been Carolyn, the CEO of Aperture, after the previous CEO, Cave Johnson, had passed away. Something had gone wrong during her upload, and upon her first activation, GLaDOS showed no trace of Carolyn's personality, and instead, she attempted to murder the entire facility. After she was quickly shut down, the technicians on the GLaDOS project sought a way to adapt her personality and curb her murderous intention. Aperture understood AI technology very well. This understanding and development of the personality construct technology itself allowed Aperture to create advanced weaponry and intelligent sentient equipment, which is where the personality construct came into existence. The technicians needed something smart, adaptable, and versatile to navigate the enrichment center under the orders and programming of whoever needed a job completed. Something that could attach to the various machines and robots of Aperture and operate them. In this early stage of development, the Personality Core team designed them as spherical objects, very similar to the appearance of an eye. This eye design granted the technicians the ability to adapt these spheres with various cosmetic features to differentiate them, as each core created had a different personality and function in the Aperture Science Facility. These cosmetic changes came in the form of different sized pupils, eye colors, and casings. Aside from these visual alterations, their eyes allowed the sentient spheres to observe their surroundings as they completed their tasks around Aperture. Alongside this, the technicians developed cases to put each core in. These not only protected them from potential fall damage, but they also gave the cores access to Aperture machinery through 3-pin plugs, which, when connected to, allowed them to operate the machinery to the specifications of their programming. As the personality cores were required to travel across the whole facility, they had two main ways of navigating. The first, physically by hand of an Aperture employee, who typically used the handles on their cases to hold them. And the second, and most common, the Aperture technicians installed rails across Aperture so that the cores could easily attach and detach from them on will. For the darker regions of Aperture, the technicians also installed a flashlight within their eye to light up their surroundings for themselves or the technicians who worked alongside them. As the technicians knew that an extremely high number of personality cores would be scattered across the entire facility, they had to design them with limited maintenance in mind. So, they created a powerful and efficient battery that kept them running for large periods of time for as little as 1.1 volts. This came as a part of Aperture's Apocalypse Protocol, in which they prepared the facility just in case an event of significance did occur that required Aperture to continue functioning without maintenance or human interference. In theory, with their design, some believed they could last for thousands of years, and with it, so would Aperture if the nanobots and cores kept the structure and foundation of Aperture secure. These cores, as in their name, were sentient with personalities, and as such, had some of their own ideas on how to run the facility and navigate it. For the most part, they were compliant and happy to get on with their roles, but others either refused to follow orders or simply lacked the programming or capability to complete their tasks. As they had to communicate with each other and Aperture's personnel, they were given the ability to communicate through various languages. This was yet another groundbreaking scientific advancement for Aperture science, as these cores displayed traits and acted extremely similar to humanity. Some even had the ability to portray emotions, anger, curiosity, happiness, and sadness. And as they were set to work, the technicians would have to make tweaks to their programming to make them as efficient as possible. The technicians believed that if they could attach the perfect blend of personality core to GLaDOS, this would, in turn, adapt her personality to align more with the views of Aperture and their goals. So, they got to work on the development of new cores that would effectively inject their thoughts and beliefs into her processes. Over time, many cores were developed and attached to GLaDOS in the hopes they would adjust her actions. But time after time, GLaDOS continued to attempt to murder the facility. However, the scientists did notice that her attempts to shut down the facility took longer each time she was activated, which suggested that although their new cores failed at their attempts to stop her, they did delay her, even if the delay was less than a second. For the cores that were not used, they were either stored away or repurposed to work in different regions of Aperture. On their aim to perfect the combination of cores, the technicians began work on a new core, in which they named the Intelligence Dampening Sphere. They believed that if they could create a core that would release a constant stream of stupid ideas, it would prevent her from actually thinking about murdering the facility. And for a little while, this core worked, where GLaDOS would later refer to it as a tumor. But the core, just like many others, did not last for long. So, just like all of the others, they repurposed it. The enrichment center and maintenance areas of Aperture was such a large space to maintain. However, the personality cores allowed the Aperture personnel to control, adapt, and operate the entire facility with ease, where the personality cores and nanobots became the backbone of Aperture. Across the Aperture Science Facility, the personality cores worked with the scientists to help it function and develop new technology. In the turret manufacturing plant, the cores kept the machinery operating. Within the enrichment center, the cores adjusted the test chambers to meet the specification of the designers so that they could achieve the results they desired from the test subjects, and others were tasked with watching over the human test subjects in extended relaxation. Every aspect of Aperture's basic function, in some way, relied on these spheres that navigated the whole facility, each with their own job to do. These functions ranged from merely monitoring the vitals of the humans to moving entire test chambers. To make sure these cores aided the facility instead of hindering it, they were programmed with failsafes to stop them from performing actions that would interfere with the aims of the scientists. When working in proximity to the test chambers, they were programmed not to tell the test subjects inside how to solve them. If they attempted to go against their programming, they were hit with a simulated jolt of pain instead. Over time, the personality cores worked at the facility, learned from their experiences, and did their best to keep their home functioning, as the human population worked on new technologies and scientific advancements. Although these cores were designed to be the highest standard, even the best technology fails and corrupts from time to time, or is stored away when it is not needed anymore. Across Aperture, the personnel had storage rooms to put these inactive cores in, and as time passed and more cores were developed, these rooms filled up. For the corrupted cores and cores deemed unsalvageable, Aperture made use of the Intelligence Incinerator, a destructive force that few objects could survive. Over time, the scientists believed that they had found the perfect combination of personality cores to curb GLaDOS's murderous needs. The first was the Curiosity Core. This orange-eyed construct pushed GLaDOS to examine her surroundings in a childlike wonder. The blue-eyed Intelligence Core injected random pieces of information into her process, one of which was the recipe for cake. The Emotion Core attempted to balance her emotions, but would frequently glow red in a constant state of anger. Finally, the Morality Core was designed to act as GLaDOS's conscience, where it instructed her programming to think about what she was doing and the consequences of her actions. Although this sounded great in theory, an Aperture employee, Doug Ratzman, was skeptical about the use of this core, as he believed you can always ignore your conscience. Regardless, when these cores were attached and GLaDOS was activated once again, she became compliant and worked with the scientists as these 4 cores injected their collective programming into her thought process. Interestingly enough, during the installation of every core, the scientists designed a failsafe in the event a core were to fall from her chassis accidentally, a sort of wireless link between the core and GLaDOS so that the core would still be active when disconnected. In GLaDOS's central AI chamber, the scientists also developed a turret connected to a core, the Rocket Sentry. This may have been developed to protect GLaDOS in the event a security issue occurred. This core was capable of swapping between a green eye when not in use, a yellow eye when it locked onto a target, and a red eye when it fired. Having built up trust with the scientists since her reactivation, GLaDOS asked them if she could perform a test on Aperture's upcoming Bring Your Cat to Work Day. From the perspective of her technicians, she had behaved, and it appeared that the cores attached to her had done their job. So they agreed to let her perform her experiment. In line with the theme of the day, she said that she wanted to perform an experiment with cats and boxes. She had almost everything she needed for the experiment, but she needed just one more thing: a little neurotoxin. Hesitantly, the scientists agreed, as this was for science. On the day of the experiment, GLaDOS ignored her conscience, locked down the entire facility, and let out the neurotoxin she had been given, when the majority of the Aperture personnel fell. With full control of Aperture, GLaDOS began her own permanent testing cycle on the scientists who had survived this, and made use of the personality cores to maintain her Aperture. As GLaDOS moved on to her first human test subject in the relaxation vault, Chell, she struggled to control her, where the test subject escaped the testing track and made her way to GLaDOS's central AI chamber. During a fight between them, Chell removed the cores on GLaDOS through a manipulation of the Rocket Sentry and dropped each one into the Aperture Science Intelligence Incinerator. With the destruction of each core, GLaDOS regained chunks back of her thought process, but this also appeared to damage her too as a result of these cores having a connection to spinning discs above GLaDOS's chassis. As Chell dropped the morality, anger, curiosity, and intelligence core into the incinerator, the server above GLaDOS grew more and more unstable until it exploded. This explosion formed a portal and pulled both Chell and GLaDOS into the parking lot of Aperture. The fall of GLaDOS was felt across the entire Aperture facility, and within the storage rooms, the cores that had been deemed unusable or corrupt reactivated and went out into the Aperture facility to run it for themselves. Over an unspecified amount of time, Some believe this was 50 years, while others believe this was closer to 50,000 years. The personality cores continued to keep Aperture functioning with extremely limited power without the supervision of any humans. As many of the cores were sentient and were free from the dominating control of Aperture, some did wish to see what life was like outside of Aperture's walls. One of these cores was Wheatley. Wheatley had known GLaDOS extremely well, as he, just like many other cores, had been attached to her for a short period of time in the hopes that he could adapt her personality. Back then, he had been known as the Intelligence Dampening Sphere, the Tumor, but now he was Wheatley. Having been repurposed and moved on to work in other parts of Aperture, he eventually landed a role in the Extended Relaxation Vault to care for the unconscious human test subjects. But after the fall of GLaDOS, his job had become much easier as the power surge from her explosion had left many of the Extended Relaxation Vaults without power, and as a result, the subjects inside of them had died. Wheatley wanted to leave Aperture, and so he searched through these vaults for a test subject that had survived this failure that would help him. Eventually, he came across Chell, who had been brought back into the facility by a party escort bot. Wheatley portrayed just how human these cores appeared to be. They had needs, emotions, and could formulate intelligent plans. On the record, these personality cores were digitally designed for a specific purpose, but others believe that each core was originally a human that had been uploaded. GLaDOS's existence as a human-uploaded personality core proves that this could be entirely possible, and in a way, this would make this story a lot darker than it already is. Together, Chell and Wheatley attempted to escape the facility. Here, Wheatley guided Chell through GLaDOS's old AI chamber. Wheatley had heard rumors that a human had taken down GLaDOS from the other cores. He just did not know it was Chell who had managed this. During their time together, Wheatley shared with Chell what he had been told about himself. That if he attempted to disconnect from the ceiling rail, he would be terminated, and that if he activated his flashlight, it would destroy him. But throughout their escape of a newly activated GLaDOS and traversal of the maintenance regions of Aperture, Wheatley discovered he had been lied to. Whether all of the cores were lied to, or if it was just Wheatley, is unknown. As Chell returned to GLaDOS's central AI chamber, she managed to corrupt GLaDOS's core to the point where the facility itself began the core transfer process. This process had been put in place by the Aperture personnel to swap out the core in charge of the central AI system, just in case its corruption attempted to harm the facility. Any one of Aperture's cores could be placed into this system, but they wanted Carolyn's human core to be successful and never sought out another core to replace her. However, this system was designed anyway, just in case they did need it. Many years later, Chell placed Wheatley into a core receptacle to prepare him to be transferred onto the central AI. But GLaDOS refused to give her permission. This stalemate led the central AI system to ask a qualified stalemate associate to press a stalemate resolution button to force the core transfer, which Chell happily pushed. This painful core transfer gave Wheatley access to the whole of Aperture, and subsequently, he placed GLaDOS's core into a potato battery as revenge for all of the awful things she had done and said to him. However, this new surge of power gave Wheatley a godlike complex, and instead of allowing Chell to leave the facility like they had planned, he smashed at an elevator he had called for her, and it dropped into the forgotten parts of Aperture. Over the next few hours, Chell and GLaDOS worked together to get back to the central AI chamber, where voice announcements played across the facility of Cave Johnson and Carolyn. Upon hearing Carolyn's voice, GLaDOS recognized it as her own, and shortly after began to recover her memories of Carolyn, and with it, a natural conscience. As they arrived back at the central AI chamber, GLaDOS and Chell used the corrupted cores of Aperture to their advantage and placed them on Wheatley during a fight, which in turn corrupted him and once again initiated the core transfer process. These corrupted cores were the Space Core, a core obsessed with space, the Adventure Core, a core that attempted to flirt with Chell and wanted to go on its own adventure, and finally, the Fact Core, which threw out random facts at Chell, some accurate, some not so much. However, this time, Wheatley had placed bombs around the stalemate resolution button. As Chell attempted to press it, the bombs exploded, and in a daze, she looked up and saw the moon through a collapsed part of the AI chamber ceiling. In this moment, she found a portal at the moon, which connected to another portal directly under Wheatley. This pulled Chell and Wheatley through to the moon along with the Space Core, who was very happy to finally be where it wanted.